The morning my daughter ignored my invitation, I told myself not to cry. Jennifer's text was only 6 words long. "Sorry, Mom. I'm too busy to come." I folded my phone into my purse and walked into the ceremony alone. But before I could even find my seat, the room suddenly fell silent. Then the governor crossed the aisle, smiled warmly, and asked, "Mrs. Eleanor Whitmore, would you mind if I sat beside you today? My own daughter believed I wasn't worth an afternoon of her time. Yet one of the most powerful men in the state seemed to believe otherwise. If this story touches something in your heart, I'd love for you to stay with me until the end. Please like this video if you've ever felt overlooked by someone you love, and subscribe if stories about family forgiveness and second chances mean something to you. I'd also love to hear your thoughts in the comments. What would you have felt in my place, and wherever you're watching from? Tell me your city, country, and what time it is there. I always enjoy knowing who's sharing this journey with me. After my husband died, the house became quieter than I ever imagined a house could be. For 43 years, there had always been some sound filling the rooms. Robert humming off-key in the kitchen while making coffee. The old television murmuring from the den. The back door opening and closing as neighbors stopped by with tomatoes from their gardens or church bulletins folded under their arms. Even when Jennifer was grown and gone, the house still felt alive because Robert was there. Then one November morning, he was not. A heart attack took him while he was raking leaves in the front yard. One minute, he was waving at Mr. Henderson across the street, joking that the maple tree was trying to bury us alive. The next, he was on the ground beneath the same red and gold leaves he had been trying to gather. After the funeral, people told me I was strong. I hated that word. Strong was what people called you when they did not know what else to say. Strong meant you still paid the electric bill when your hands were shaking. Strong meant you smiled at the grocery store when someone asked how you were doing. Strong meant you slept on only one side of the bed because the other side still felt like it belonged to someone. I was 68 years old, retired from teaching, widowed, and living alone in a modest white house on Maple Ridge Lane in Brookhaven, Ohio. It was the kind of neighborhood where people noticed if your trash cans stayed out too long, but not always if your heart was breaking. My daughter Jennifer lived only 25 minutes away. Somehow, that distance felt longer every year. She had married Brian Collins, a man who wore expensive watches and spoke about money as if it were a language only intelligent people understood. They lived in a gated subdivision with stone columns at the entrance and lawns so perfect they looked ironed. Jennifer had become a marketing director for a healthcare company in Columbus, and she carried herself like every room was a meeting she needed to control. I was proud of her. Truly, I was. But pride can ache when it has nowhere to go. When Jennifer was little, she used to run into my classroom after school and sit at my desk, drawing flowers on sticky notes while I graded papers. She knew the names of my students. She helped me decorate bulletin boards before open house. She used to say, "Mommy, when I grow up, I want to help people like you do." I kept one of those sticky notes in my Bible for years. A purple crayon flower. Crooked petals. Her name written backward across the bottom. But somewhere between college, marriage promotions, and dinner parties, my daughter began looking at my life as if it were something small, something old-fashioned, something embarrassing. She stopped calling me Mommy long ago, of course. Then she stopped calling me Mom with warmth. Eventually, most of her messages began with Eleanor, usually when she was irritated. "Eleanor, you really shouldn't wear that old navy coat to Emily's school event. Eleanor, please don't bring homemade casserole to the fundraiser. They're using caterers." Eleanor, "I know you mean well, but you don't understand how these things work anymore." Each sentence sounded polite enough from the outside, but inside it, I could hear the door closing. My granddaughter Emily was different. She was 16, tall and thoughtful with Jennifer's eyes, but Robert's gentle spirit. When she was younger, she spent weekends with me baking oatmeal cookies and helping me water the hydrangeas. We watched old movies together and played Scrabble at the kitchen table. But as Emily grew older, Jennifer made it harder. She has SAT prep. She has volleyball practice. She's busy with friends. She doesn't need to spend every weekend sitting in an old house. That last one had not been meant for me to hear. Jennifer said it to Brian during a Thanksgiving dinner while I was in the hallway gathering coats. I stood there with Emily's scarf in my hand and felt something inside me fold inward. An old house. That was what I had become to my daughter. Something outdated. Something she visited out of obligation. So I found other ways to keep living. On Mondays and Wednesdays, I volunteered at the Brookhaven Public Library. My friend, Margaret Ellis, ran the place with the same fierce tenderness she had carried since we were young teachers together. She had silver curls, red reading glasses, and a way of making every lost child feel found. "You should let people help you, Eleanor," she told me often. "I do," I said. "No, you let people hand you things. That is not the same." She was right, but I rarely admitted it. At the library, I read to children during story hour. I helped seniors fill out online forms they did not understand. I organized donated books and repaired torn pages with clear tape. The quiet work soothed me. On Fridays, I helped at the community center, where retired folks came for lunch card games and blood pressure checks. Sometimes I tutored adults studying for their GED. Sometimes I sat with widows who still twisted wedding rings on their fingers even years after losing their husbands. I understood that kind of silence. People in town were kind to me. They called me Mrs. Whitmore. Former students stopped me at the farmer's market and said things like, "You probably don't remember me, but you changed my life." I always remembered them. Maybe not every name right away, but I remembered a face, a struggle, a sentence written in the margin of an essay. Teaching had never left me. But Jennifer did not see any of that as important. To her, importance had become something measured in invitations, salaries, photographs, and who sat at which table. She liked charity events, but only the kind with photographers. She liked community service, but only if the board members had influence. She liked kindness when it came printed on glossy programs. My kind of service was invisible, and invisible things did not impress my daughter. The first Christmas after Robert died, I invited Jennifer, Brian, and Emily to spend Christmas Eve with me. I bought a small ham-baked Robert's favorite sweet potato casserole and hung the stockings even though I knew it was foolish. Jennifer arrived 40 minutes late wearing a cream-colored coat I was afraid to hug too tightly. "We can only stay an hour," she said before taking off her gloves. "Brian has a client thing later." Emily hugged me hard enough to make up for both of them. During dinner, I tried to tell Jennifer about a young man at the community center who had passed his GED after failing twice. I told her how he cried when he saw his score. Jennifer smiled without looking up from her phone. "That's nice," she said. Just that. That's nice. I watched the candlelight move across her face and wondered when my stories had stopped mattering to her. After they left, I washed 3 almost full plates of food into the trash. Emily had slipped a folded napkin under my teacup. Inside, she had written, "I miss being here. Love you, Grandma." I pressed that napkin to my chest and cried at the sink. Still, I kept trying. I sent birthday cards. I left voicemails. I invited them to Sunday dinner. I offered to attend Emily's games. Sometimes Jennifer answered. Sometimes she did not. When she did, there was always a reason why it was not a good time. Then one afternoon in early spring, Margaret found me shelving biographies at the library and said, "Eleanor, the mayor's office called." I nearly dropped a stack of books. "The mayor's office for what?" She smiled in a strange way as if she knew something I did not. "They want your current mailing address. For taxes." "For an invitation, apparently." I laughed because it sounded absurd. "Margaret, I'm sure they've mistaken me for someone else." "No," she said softly. "I don't think they have. I should have asked more questions. I should have wondered why Margaret's eyes looked wet. But I was used to staying small. I was used to assuming good things were meant for other people. That evening, I returned home, made a cup of chamomile tea, and sat at the kitchen table beneath the yellow light. The house was quiet, except for the refrigerator humming and the old clock ticking above the doorway. I looked at the empty chair across from me, Robert's chair, and whispered, "Something odd happened today." Of course, no answer came. But in that silence, I felt the strange stir of something I had not felt in a long time. Not happiness, exactly. Not yet. Just the smallest hint that maybe my life was not as forgotten as my daughter believed. The invitation arrived 3 days later in a thick, cream-colored envelope. I found it tucked between the grocery store flyer and the electric bill sitting inside my mailbox, as if it were just another ordinary piece of paper. At first, I nearly overlooked it. I had been thinking about whether I still had enough milk for cornbread and whether the back porch light needed a new bulb. Then I saw the gold seal. Not a sticker, not printed decoration. A real raised seal pressed into the flap. City of Brookhaven. My fingers paused around the envelope. For a moment, I simply stood at the end of my driveway with the mail in my hand, listening to a lawnmower buzzing somewhere down the street. The spring air smelled like damp grass and lilacs. A school bus rolled past brakes, squealing softly as it stopped near the corner. Children spilled out laughing, backpacks bouncing. I watched them for a second longer than necessary. After teaching for more than 40 years, I still noticed children the way some people noticed birds. Their faces, their posture, the way a tired child walked differently from a happy one. Even from across the street, I could tell which ones were eager to get home and which ones wished the ride had lasted longer. Old habits never leave you. Inside the house, I placed the bills on the kitchen counter and carried the cream envelope to the table. I made tea first, not because I needed it, but because I was suddenly nervous. That was silly, I told myself. At my age, very few envelopes should make my hands tremble. Still, they did. I opened it carefully with the butter knife Robert used to use for letters. He always said a letter deserved better than being torn open like a bag of potato chips. I smiled at the memory, then slid out a folded card printed on heavy paper. Dear Mrs. Eleanor Whitmore, on behalf of the City of Brookhaven and the Brookhaven Community Foundation, we are honored to invite you to attend this year's Civic Recognition Ceremony, where you will be presented with the Lifetime Community Impact Award. I stopped reading. Lifetime Community Impact Award. The words looked too grand sitting there on my kitchen table. I read them again slower this time, as if they might rearrange themselves into something more believable. Lifetime. Community. Impact. Award. I let out a small laugh, the kind that comes when you are alone and do not know what else to do with surprise. "Oh, Robert," I whispered, glancing toward his empty chair. "Can you imagine?" The ceremony would be held at the Brookhaven Civic Hall on May 17th at 6 o'clock in the evening. It said there would be dinner remarks from the mayor and recognition of several community leaders. Guests were welcome. Formal attire requested, though, not required. That last line made me laugh again. Formal attire requested. I owned one navy dress I wore to church on Easter and funerals. I supposed it would have to do. For several minutes, I just sat there, holding the invitation in both hands. I did not think of fame. I did not think of newspapers or speeches. In my mind, I imagined a small room with folding chairs. Maybe a few town officials. Margaret smiling too proudly in the front row. And perhaps a bouquet of grocery store flowers handed to me by Mayor Daniel Brooks. It felt sweet. A little embarrassing, but sweet. Then the thought came before I could stop it. Jennifer should be there. A mother can be hurt 1,000 times and still reach for her child first when something meaningful happens. That is one of the painful mysteries of love. It does not always protect your dignity. I told myself not to expect too much. Jennifer was busy. Jennifer had responsibilities. Jennifer lived in a world of calendars, conference calls, and client dinners. But surely for this she might come. It was not a huge thing. I knew that. But it was mine. And I wanted my daughter to see me standing somewhere other than the kitchen. I wanted her to see me being thanked. I picked up my phone and stared at her name for nearly a full minute before calling. It rang 4 times, then went to voicemail. "Hi, sweetheart," I said, trying to sound cheerful. "I received a little invitation today. Apparently, the city is giving me some kind of community award next month. Nothing too fancy, I'm sure, but it would mean a great deal to me if you, Brian, and Emily could come. The ceremony is May 17th at 6. Call me when you can. I love you." I listened to the message before sending it, then deleted it and recorded it again because my voice cracked on "I love you." The second version sounded better. I sent a photo of the invitation too, just in case. For the rest of that day, I carried a foolish brightness inside me. I cleaned the kitchen even though it was already clean. I took my navy dress from the closet and held it against myself in the bedroom mirror. The fabric was a little loose at the shoulders. I had lost weight after Robert died, though I never admitted how much. "You'll do," I told my reflection. The woman in the mirror looked older than I felt in my memories. Soft white hair pinned back, fine lines around the mouth, hands that had held chalk pencils, lunch trays, feverish foreheads, and funeral programs. I wondered what Jennifer saw when she looked at me. A burden, a reminder. An old version of herself she was trying to escape. That evening, Emily called. "Grandma." Her voice came bright through the phone. "Mom showed me the invitation." "That is so amazing." My heart lifted. "Oh, honey, it's probably just a little local thing." "No, it's not just little. It says lifetime impact." "That's huge." I smiled into the phone. "You always know how to make me feel important." My heart lifted. "Oh, honey, it's probably just a little local thing." "No, it's not just little. It says lifetime impact. That's huge." I smiled into the phone. "You always know how to make me feel important. You are important." There was a pause after she said it, and somehow I knew she had lowered her voice. Jennifer must have been nearby. "Do you think you can come?" I asked. "I want to," Emily said quickly. "I really do. I have to check if Mom already put something on the calendar." That sentence told me more than she meant it to. "I understand," I said gently. "I'm going to try, okay? That's all I can ask." After we hung up, I sat with the phone in my lap and let myself hope. The next morning, Jennifer finally called. I was watering the geraniums on the back porch when my phone buzzed. Her name appeared on the screen, and I wiped my hand on my cardigan before answering. "Hi, sweetheart." "Hi, Eleanor." Her tone was brisk, distracted. I heard traffic in the background, then the clicking sound of a turn signal. "I saw your message." "Oh, good. Did you see the invitation?" "Yes. Congratulations." The word landed neatly, politely, and without warmth. "Thank you," I said. "I know it may not be your kind of event, but I thought maybe you all could come. It would mean a lot to have family there." There was silence. Not a soft silence, a calculating one. "What date did you say?" "May 17th. 6 o'clock. "Oh," she exhaled. "That's the same night as the Hartford benefit." I did not know what the Hartford benefit was, but I already understood it outranked me. "It's a major networking event for Brian," she continued. "A lot of developers and hospital board members will be there. We committed weeks ago." "I see. And Emily has finals coming up. I don't want her distracted." Of course. Another pause. Then Jennifer said, honestly, Mom, those local awards dinners can drag on forever. You know how they are. Speeches cold chicken people clapping for every volunteer who ever baked cookies. I looked down at the geraniums. Water had pooled in the saucer beneath the pot. I suppose they can, I said quietly. I don't mean to be rude. I just don't want you expecting us and then being disappointed. You'll have Margaret there, right? Yes. Good. She loves that kind of thing. That kind of thing. I closed my eyes. Jennifer continued, send me pictures afterward, okay? Maybe I can post something nice. Something nice. A public daughter, even if not a present one. I will, I said. And congratulations again. Really, it's sweet. Sweet, not meaningful, not deserved. Sweet. After we hung up, I stood on the porch with the watering can hanging from my hand. A thin stream continued spilling from the spout onto the wooden boards near my shoes. I told myself I would not cry. I had survived widowhood. I had survived retirement. I had survived holidays at tables where I felt like an invited guest instead of a mother. Surely I could survive my daughter skipping one little ceremony. But grief is not always about the event itself. Sometimes it is about realizing how small your place has become in someone else's life. That night, I put the invitation back in its envelope and laid it beside Robert's photograph on the mantel. He was smiling in the picture, wearing the brown sweater Jennifer had once teased him about. She'll come around, he used to tell me when Jennifer spoke too sharply. Give her time. I had given her time, years of it. Still, as I stood in the dim living room, looking at that cream envelope under the lamplight, I whispered the same excuse he always had. She's busy, but deep down, a quieter truth answered me. No one is too busy for what they truly value. And for the first time in my life, I began to wonder whether my daughter had stopped valuing me at all. Before Jennifer saw me as an old woman in a cardigan, I had been Mrs. Whitmore of room 214. For more than 40 years, that classroom was my second home. Brookhaven High School sat on the edge of town, a long brick building with drafty windows, squeaky floors, and a flagpole that clanged every windy morning. My room was at the end of the English hallway near the vending machines and the stairwell where students liked to hide when they were late. Room 214 smelled like chalk dust, old books, floor wax, and sometimes teenage anxiety. I had 3 rows of wooden desks, a bulletin board covered with quotes, and a metal filing cabinet that never closed properly. On the first day of every school year, I wrote the same sentence across the blackboard. Your voice matters before the world agrees. Some students rolled their eyes. Some copied it down. Some stared at it like they had never been told such a thing before. Those were the ones I watched most carefully. Teaching English was never just about grammar or essays to me. Yes, I taught Shakespeare poetry, persuasive writing, and the difference between there, and there until I thought I would dream about it. But what I really taught, or tried to teach, was that a person's story could save them. A child who believed his story mattered might stay in school one more day. A girl who learned to write her pain down might not let someone else define her. A quiet boy in the back row might discover that he was not stupid, only unheard. Every year, there were students who needed more than a lesson plan. There was Carla, who came to school hungry and pretended she hated breakfast so no one would know. I kept granola bars in my desk drawer because of her. There was Marcus, whose father went to prison halfway through sophomore year. He stopped turning in assignments not because he was lazy, but because he had started working nights at a gas station to help his mother. There was Denise, who wore the same sweatshirt every day in January because it was the warmest thing she owned. And there was a boy named Michael Reynolds. I did not know then that his name would one day appear on campaign signs, television interviews, and official state letterhead. To me, he was just a thin, serious teenager with shoes too small for his feet and eyes that never relaxed. He entered my junior English class in September, carrying a backpack with a broken zipper. His hair was always neatly combed, but his shirts were often washed thin. He sat in the second-to-last row near the window, close enough to listen, but far enough to disappear if no one cared to notice him. I noticed. Teachers always know which students are trying to become invisible. Michael rarely spoke unless called on. When he did, his voice was steady, careful, and older than it should have been. His essays were thoughtful, but rushed, as if he wrote them in whatever scraps of time life allowed him. Sometimes there were faint circles under his eyes. Sometimes he rested his head against the window during silent reading and fought sleep so hard it hurt to watch. One afternoon, I found him in the hallway after the final bell, staring at a college brochure on the bulletin board. "Thinking about applying?" I asked. He startled, then shrugged. "No, ma'am. No college costs money." "That is true," I said. "But scholarships exist." He gave me a look I had seen many times before. Not disrespectful. Worse. Defeated. "Scholarships are for people who have time to be impressive," he said. Then he walked away. That sentence stayed with me. I learned later that his mother worked double shifts at a nursing home. His younger sister had asthma. Their rent was always behind. Michael worked evenings washing dishes at a diner, and some mornings he arrived at school after sleeping only 4 hours. I also learned that he had stopped eating lunch so he could save money. A proud child will not always ask for help. Sometimes you have to help in a way that lets them keep their pride. So I made arrangements quietly. I spoke with the cafeteria manager and paid ahead for several student lunches under a fun name, not a student name. I told Michael he had been selected for an academic support meal voucher, which was not exactly a lie, though I invented the title myself. I gave him used books and said they were classroom extras. When his glasses broke, I asked the school nurse about a community eye program and made sure the form found its way into his folder. But the biggest fight was keeping him from quitting. Near Thanksgiving, he stopped turning in assignments for 2 weeks. One Friday afternoon, I found a withdrawal form on the guidance counselor's desk with his name printed at the top. I carried that form back to my classroom and waited. When Michael came in after school, his face tightened the moment he saw it. "I need to work full-time," he said before I could speak. I folded my hands on the desk. "You need to graduate. My family needs money. Your family needs your future, too." He looked away. "With respect, Mrs. Whitmore, you don't know what my family needs." He was right. That was the hardest part. I did not know the full weight of his home. I did not know what it felt like to be 17 and already carry bills in your pocket. I only knew what I had seen happen to students who left school because hardship convinced them their dreams were selfish. So I did something I rarely did. I told him about my father. I told him I grew up in a house where money was counted twice before groceries were bought. I told him my father believed education was the only door poverty could not permanently lock. I told him he used to say, "The world will charge you for everything except what you carry in your mind." Michael listened without looking at me. Then I said, "I cannot promise life will become easy if you stay, but I can promise it will become harder if you leave." His jaw trembled just once. "I'm tired," he whispered. "I know," I said, and I did know not in the same way, but enough to recognize the sound of a child trying not to break. After that, Robert and I talked late into the night at our kitchen table. Jennifer was 12, then already asleep upstairs beneath a purple comforter. Bills were spread between us. Our own budget was tight. Teachers did not earn much, and Robert's job at the hardware store had been cutting hours. Still, when I told him about Michael, Robert reached across the table and touched my hand. "What does the boy need?" he asked. "Time," I said. "Books. Application fees. Maybe a bus pass. Maybe someone to believe he belongs somewhere bigger than this town." Robert sighed not with irritation, but with the tired goodness of a man who knew my heart before I explained it. "We can skip replacing the garage door another year," he said. I shook my head. "Robert, the garage door can keep complaining. That boy might not get another chance." That was the kind of man my husband was. So I helped Michael apply for scholarships. I stayed after school 3 nights a week while he rewrote essays. I drove him to a regional debate competition because he could not afford the transportation fee. I bought him a navy tie from a department store clearance rack for his college interview and told him it had belonged to my nephew. It had not. When his first acceptance letter arrived, he brought it to room 214 unopened. He stood at my desk, hands shaking. "You open it," he said. "No," I told him. "This door is yours." He opened it. Then he sat down hard in the nearest chair and covered his face. He had been accepted with scholarship support. I remember placing one hand on his shoulder and looking toward the doorway where Jennifer stood waiting for me. She had come from middle school and was annoyed because I was late taking her home. At the time, I did not understand the look on her face. Now I think I do. To Jennifer, those afternoons may have looked like proof that other children came first. She saw me grading papers during dinner. She heard me on the phone with parents. She waited in my classroom while I helped students who were not mine by blood. She watched me spend pieces of myself on teenagers who eventually graduated and left. I thought I was showing her compassion. Maybe she thought I was giving away love that belonged to her. That possibility still hurts me. But I was not a perfect mother. No woman who loves the world deeply can avoid failing someone close to her. I tried to be present. I attended Jennifer's concerts. I packed her lunches. I sewed her Halloween costumes. I held her when her first boyfriend broke her heart. But there were evenings when I came home tired from carrying other children's pain and my own daughter received what was left of me. I can admit that now. Back then, I only knew there were children standing at the edge of a cliff, and sometimes I was the adult close enough to pull them back. Years passed. Students graduated. Some wrote letters. Some disappeared. Some returned with babies' military uniforms, wedding invitations, or business cards. Michael sent one letter his freshman year of college, then another when he made the dean's list. Then life moved forward as it does. I kept every letter, not because I expected recognition, not because I wanted applause. I kept them because on lonely days, they reminded me that quiet work still mattered. By the time I retired, room 214 had new floors, a smartboard, and a younger teacher with bright shoes and fresh ideas. On my last day, I stood alone in that classroom after everyone had gone and ran my fingers along the edge of my old desk. I thought of every student who had sat before me. The hungry ones, the angry ones, the brilliant ones, the broken ones, the ones who needed only a little kindness at the right moment. And yes, I thought of Jennifer too. I wondered whether she had ever understood that love does not divide like money. Giving some away does not always mean less remains at home. But perhaps I had never explained that to her. Perhaps I had assumed she knew. That was the sorrow hidden beneath all my years of service. I had helped hundreds of young people find their voices. Yet somehow, I had never fully heard the wound growing inside my own daughter. The evening of the ceremony, I almost did not go. That is the truth. I stood in my bedroom, wearing the navy dress, the one I had pressed twice that afternoon, even though the fabric barely wrinkled. My white hair was pinned back with pearl clips Jennifer had given me years ago for Mother's Day, back when she still picked gifts herself, instead of having them shipped with printed cards. I had put on a little lipstick, a pair of low black heels, and Robert's wedding band on a chain beneath my collar. Then I looked at myself in the mirror and suddenly felt foolish. An old woman going to a dinner alone. No husband beside me. No daughter in the audience. No son-in-law shaking hands. No granddaughter waving from the front row. Just me. I touched the invitation on my dresser. It had been resting there all week beside my earrings and the small bottle of perfume I used only on Sundays. For days, I had told myself it was enough that Margaret would be there. It was enough that the city had remembered me. It was enough that I had been invited at all. But sometimes, loneliness is not about having no one. Sometimes, it is about knowing exactly who is missing. My phone buzzed just as I reached for my purse. For one bright, foolish second, I thought it might be Jennifer saying they had changed their minds. It was Emily. "Grandma, I'm so sorry. Mom said we can't come. I tried. Please send pictures. I love you so much." I read the message twice, then held the phone against my chest. "I know, sweetheart," I whispered, though she could not hear me. A minute later, another message came. This one was from Jennifer. "Hope your event goes well tonight. We're heading to the Hartford benefit. Don't forget to take photos. No, I love you. No, I wish I could be there." Just a reminder to document the evening for her convenience. I placed the phone face down on the dresser and closed my eyes. For one dangerous moment, I considered taking off the dress, washing my face, and spending the night in my robe with tea and a book. No one would blame me. Margaret would understand. The mayor's office could mail the plaque. Life would continue. Then I looked at Robert's photograph on the nightstand. He was wearing his old brown sweater, smiling like he knew something good about the world that the rest of us kept forgetting. "You would make me go," I said softly. And I could almost hear him answer. "Yes, Ellie, I would." So I went. The Brookhaven Civic Hall sat downtown, across from the courthouse, a limestone building with tall windows and wide steps. I had been there many times for school board meetings, charity drives, and one memorable spelling bee where a 7th grader won on the word acquiesce. I expected the usual small-town arrangement, a few rows of chairs, coffee urns, local officials, maybe a photographer from the weekly paper. But as my taxi turned onto Madison Street, I leaned forward in surprise. There were police cars outside. Not one or two, several. Barricades lined the curb. A news van was parked near the entrance with its satellite mast raised. Men and women in suits stood near the doors, speaking into small devices clipped to their sleeves. People moved up the steps in evening clothes, not church dresses and casual jackets, but real formal wear. For a second, I wondered whether the taxi driver had brought me to the wrong event. "This the Civic Hall?" I asked. "Yes, ma'am," he said. "Big night, looks like." "Big night." My stomach tightened. I paid him, thanked him, and stepped carefully onto the sidewalk. The evening air was cool, and the breeze lifted the edge of my shawl. I stood there, clutching my purse, staring at the bright doors, as if they might reject me. A young woman with a headset approached. "Mrs. Whitmore?" I blinked. "Yes." Her face lit up with relief. "We've been watching for you. Right this way." Watching for me? I followed her up the steps, my heels clicking softly against the stone. Inside, the lobby was full of people I recognized only partly. Members of the school board, city council members, business owners, clergy, reporters, former students, some gray-haired now themselves, standing in clusters with folded programs in their hands. The moment I entered, several heads turned, then more. A murmur moved through the lobby like a breeze through dry leaves. "There she is. That's Mrs. Whitmore." Oh my goodness, she came. A woman I had taught in 1987 pressed a hand to her mouth. A man with silver hair stepped forward and said, "Mrs. Whitmore, You probably don't remember me. Thomas Avery? I said before he could finish. You wrote that essay about your grandfather's fishing boat. His eyes filled instantly. You remembered. Of course I did. He hugged me carefully, as if I were made of porcelain. Then, another former student came forward. Then another. Someone thanked me for helping with college applications. Someone else told me I had kept him from dropping out. A woman introduced me to her daughter and said, "This is the teacher I told you about." I smiled until my cheeks hurt. I thanked them. I squeezed hands. I tried not to cry too early in the evening, but beneath all of it, confusion kept growing. Why were so many people here? Why were there cameras? Why did the air feel charged with something no one had told me? Margaret appeared near the entrance to the main hall, wearing a deep green dress and an expression that was far too innocent. "Margaret Ellis," I said, narrowing my eyes. "What have you done?" She took my hands. "Nothing illegal. That is not reassuring." She laughed, but her eyes shimmered. "Just enjoy tonight, Eleanor. Please." Before I could press her, a man from the mayor's office guided us toward the ballroom. The doors opened. I stopped walking. The hall was full. Not half full. Not politely full. Completely full. Round tables covered in white linen filled the room from the stage to the back wall. Tall arrangements of blue and white flowers stood in the center of each table. Cameras were set up along the side aisle. On the stage, behind the podium, hung a large banner, Brookhaven Civic Recognition Ceremony, honoring a lifetime of service. My name was printed beneath it. Eleanor Whitmore. For a moment, the letters blurred. Margaret slipped her arm through mine. "Breathe. I am trying," I whispered. We had taken only a few steps into the ballroom when the room began to quiet. It happened gradually at first. One table stopped talking. Then another. Chairs shifted. Heads turned. A hush spread outward until even the clinking of silverware seemed to pause. I thought perhaps the mayor had entered behind me. Then everyone began to stand. My heart pounded so hard, I felt it in my throat. I looked at Margaret in panic. "Why are they standing?" She did not answer. At the far side of the ballroom, near the front entrance reserved for officials, a group of security officers moved aside. A tall man in a dark suit stepped through, followed by aides and state police. I recognized him immediately. Everyone in Ohio would have. Governor Michael Reynolds. I had seen his face on television many times. Older now, broader in the shoulders, silver at the temples, but still with those serious eyes that never quite relaxed. For several seconds, my mind refused to connect the man crossing the ballroom with the thin teenage boy who once stood in room 214, holding a college acceptance letter. He walked past the VIP table, past the mayor, past the donors and officials rising to greet him, straight toward me. The applause began, but it sounded far away like rain against windows. When he reached me, the governor stopped, placed one hand over his heart, and bowed his head. "Mrs. Whitmore," he said, his voice low enough that only those close by could hear. "I have waited a long time to say this properly." My mouth opened, but no words came. He smiled, and for just a heartbeat I saw the boy again. Boy. Then in front of the entire room, the governor gestured toward the empty chair beside mine at the honoree table. "Would you mind," he asked, "if I sat beside you tonight?" The ballroom went utterly still. I thought of Jennifer at her benefit dinner, surrounded by people she considered important. I thought of her text sitting cold on my phone. I thought of all the years she had treated my life as something small and outdated, And there I stood, trembling in my navy dress, while the governor of our state waited for my permission, like I was the most important person in the room. I swallowed hard. "Of course, Michael," I whispered. His eyes softened at the sound of his first name. Then he offered me his arm, and together we walked to the front table while the entire hall rose in applause. Governor Michael Reynolds sat beside me as if it were the most natural thing in the world. Not at the center table with donors not beside the mayor, not surrounded by the people who had clearly expected to be close to him. He sat on my right, pulled his chair in gently, and placed his folded program beside his water glass. Every movement around us seemed careful now, measured by the presence of power. But when he looked at me, I did not see power. I saw the boy with the broken backpack. For several minutes, I could barely speak. The mayor approached our table first. Daniel Brooks was a kind man in his early 50s, with silver-framed glasses and the slightly nervous energy of someone who still cared what people thought of him. He shook the governor's hand, then turned to me. "Mrs. Whitmore," he said warmly, "we are deeply honored to have you here tonight." I almost laughed. "Mayor Brooks, you make it sound as if I had to travel from Washington." The governor chuckled softly. Mayor Brooks smiled. "In a way, ma'am tonight has brought quite a few people from far away because of you." I looked at him confused. "Because of me?" He opened his mouth as if to explain, but the governor gently interrupted. "Let them tell it properly, Daniel." The mayor nodded. "Of course." That only made me more uneasy. Dinner was served, though I could hardly taste it. There was roasted chicken, green beans, mashed potatoes, salad with candied pecans, and rolls so soft they reminded me of church suppers. Around the room, people kept glancing toward our table. Some smiled. Some dabbed their eyes with napkins. Others whispered to one another while trying not to stare. I wanted to turn to Margaret and demand answers, but she was seated 2 chairs away, pretending to be fascinated by her salad. The governor leaned toward me. "Are you all right, Mrs. Whitmore?" "I'm not sure," I admitted. His expression softened. "You always did tell the truth." That nearly broke me. There are certain memories that remain untouched by time. A voice, a phrase, a look in someone's eyes. Suddenly, I was back in room 214, watching a teenage boy sit at my desk, trying to sound brave while life pressed him flat. "I did not know you remembered me," I said. He looked almost wounded. "Mrs. Whitmore, there has not been a single important day of my life when I did not remember you." I turned away quickly, pretending to adjust my napkin. For a long time, I had believed my life had become small. Not meaningless exactly, but quiet. Contained. I thought the work I had done lived only in old yearbooks, boxes of letters, and occasional grocery store encounters. To hear a man like him say that I had traveled with him through all the important days of his life felt impossible. The program began after dessert. Mayor Brooks stepped to the podium and welcomed everyone. He spoke about civic duty volunteerism and the invisible people who held communities together. His words were kind, but my mind wandered. I kept looking toward the back of the room, though I knew Jennifer would not appear. A foolish habit. Hope is stubborn, even when dignity begs it to stop. Several awards were given first. A local nurse was honored for organizing free health screenings. A firefighter received recognition for 30 years of service. A young woman who ran a food pantry cried through most of her acceptance speech. I clapped for each of them, grateful the attention was not yet on me. Then Mayor Brooks returned to the podium and said, "Our final honoree tonight is someone whose impact cannot be measured by one project. Impact cannot be measured by one project, one donation, or one office held. Her work has lived quietly in classrooms, libraries, kitchens, scholarship forms, late-night phone calls, and the futures of people who might never have found their way without her. One donation or one office held. Her work has lived quietly in classrooms, libraries, kitchens, scholarship forms, late-night phone calls, and the futures of people who might never have found their way without her. My hands went cold. On the large screen behind him, a photograph appeared. Room 214, my classroom. I was younger in the picture, maybe in my 40s, standing beside the blackboard with a stack of books in my arms. The sentence written behind me was the same one I had written every year. Your voice matters before the world agrees. A sound moved through the room, soft and emotional. The mayor continued. For 43 years, Mrs. Eleanor Whitmore taught English at Brookhaven High School. But those who knew her understood that she taught far more than English. The screen changed. A video began. I saw faces, former students. One by one, they appeared on the screen, speaking from offices, homes, classrooms, military bases, hospitals, and living rooms. Some were old now. Some I barely recognized until they smiled. Some had children beside them. Some held photographs from years ago. A woman with gray-streaked hair said, Mrs. Whitmore helped me apply to college when no one in my family had ever gone. A man in a mechanic's shirt said, she bought me lunch for 3 months and somehow made me believe it was a school program. I knew later. I never forgot. Another woman said, when my mother died, Mrs. Whitmore sat with me after school every day until I could breathe again. A doctor appeared next, then a judge, then a retired Army captain, then a mother of 4 who said I taught her that writing could keep pain from turning into bitterness. I pressed my fingers to my mouth. I had no idea anyone had done this. Margaret reached over and squeezed my hand. Then the screen went dark. Mayor Brooks stepped back from the podium. And now he said, voice thick, it is my honor to invite Governor Michael Reynolds to speak. The room rose before the governor even reached the stage. He buttoned his suit jacket, gave my shoulder a gentle touch as he passed and walked to the podium. The applause lasted so long that he had to wait. I stared down at the table. My heart felt too full for my chest. When the room finally settled, Governor Reynolds looked across the audience, then at me. I have given many speeches in my life, he began. Campaign speeches, budget speeches, emergency addresses, commencement remarks. But tonight may be the most personal speech I have ever given. The room became completely still. I grew up not far from here, he said. My mother worked double shifts at Brookhaven Manor Nursing Home. My younger sister was often sick. By the time I was 17, I believed adulthood meant surrendering dreams one bill at a time. A few people nodded quietly. I was not a promising student in the way people often define promise. I was tired, I was poor, I was proud, and I was very close to dropping out. My eyes filled. He continued. There was a teacher who noticed, not because I asked for help. I did not ask. I was too ashamed, but she noticed anyway. He looked at me again. She noticed when I stopped eating lunch. She noticed when my essays got shorter because I was working nights. She noticed when I stopped looking at college brochures because I had decided hope was too expensive. A tear slipped down my cheek. She found ways to help me without taking away my dignity. She made sure I had lunch. She helped me get glasses when mine broke. She stayed after school for hours helping me rewrite scholarship essays. She drove me to a debate competition because I could not afford the transportation fee. She gave me a tie for my first college interview and told me it belonged to her nephew. Soft laughter moved through the room. The governor smiled. I later learned there was no nephew. I covered my face with one hand. He paused, and when he spoke again, his voice changed. But the thing Mrs. Whitmore gave me that mattered most was not food or books or application fees or a tie. She gave me evidence. Evidence that someone like me could belong in rooms I had only seen from the outside. The room blurred through my tears. I stand here tonight as governor of this state because many people helped me. My mother, my sister, mentors, friends, voters who trusted me. But the first person outside my family who looked at me as if my future was real was sitting at a classroom desk in room 214. He turned fully toward me. Mrs. Whitmore, I did not come tonight as a governor honoring a citizen. I came as a former student, honoring the teacher who refused to let me disappear. The applause was immediate, thunderous, rising like a wave. People stood again. I shook my head, overwhelmed, but the governor was not finished. He lifted a folder from the podium. Tonight, by proclamation of the office of the governor, we recognize Eleanor Whitmore for a lifetime of extraordinary service to education and community. But I also want to announce something more lasting. The room quieted again. In partnership with the Brookhaven Community Foundation, my office will help establish the Eleanor Whitmore Future Voices Scholarship, awarded annually to students who show promise, perseverance, and the courage to keep going when life tells them to stop. A sound escaped me before I could stop it. Not a sob exactly, something deeper. Margaret put her arm around my shoulders. The governor's voice softened, because that is what she taught us, that our voices matter before the world agrees. Everyone stood again. I could not rise at first. My knees felt weak. Then Margaret helped me up, and the governor stepped down from the stage, walked straight to me, and took both my hands. For a moment, the camera's applause, flowers, and official seals disappeared. There was only Michael, the boy I had once helped, the man he had become. Thank you, he said. I shook my head through tears. You did the hard part. No, Mom, he replied. You made me believe there was a hard part worth surviving. And somewhere across town, my daughter was sitting at a benefit dinner, unaware that the mother she considered too ordinary for her world had just become the center of one much larger than either of us had imagined. By the time I returned home that night, my phone looked as if it had caught fire. Messages, missed calls, voicemails, notifications from numbers I did not recognize, a local news alert, then another from a statewide station. Even my email inbox, which usually contained library schedules and pharmacy coupons, had filled with subject lines that made me sit down before opening them. Beloved Brookhaven teacher, honored by governor. Governor credits former teacher for saving his future. Eleanor Whitmore, Future Voices Scholarship announced. I stared at the screen until the words became blurry. Margaret had driven me home after the ceremony because I was too shaken to call a taxi. She walked me to the porch, held my hands, and said, Do not hide from this, Eleanor. I don't know what to do with it, I told her. Let people love you. That sounded simple when she said it. It was not. For most of my life, I had been comfortable giving. Giving advice, giving time, giving rides, giving food, giving patience, giving second chances. Receiving was another matter. Receiving attention felt like standing under a bright light in a dress that did not quite fit. Inside the house, I placed the framed proclamation on the kitchen table because I did not know where else to put it. The plaque leaned against the fruit bowl. The bouquet from the ceremony filled my largest vase and still had too many flowers, so I had to use a water pitcher for the rest. The house, which had felt so empty that morning, now looked crowded with proof that the night had actually happened. I took off my heels and sat in Robert's chair. Not mine, his. For a while, I simply let the quiet settle around me. Then, my phone rang again. Jennifer. I looked at her name until the screen went dark. A few seconds later, it rang again. Jennifer. This time, I answered. Hello, Mom. Her voice was breathless, not warm exactly, but startled. Are you home? Yes. Oh my God. She exhaled sharply. Why didn't you tell me the governor was going to be there? I closed my eyes. Not Mom. Are you okay? Not. I'm sorry, I missed it. Not even congratulations. Why didn't you tell me? I didn't know, I said. You didn't know, no. There was noise behind her. I heard Brian's voice low and urgent, then what sounded like a car door closing. We just left the benefit, she said. People were talking about it there. At the Hartford benefit, Mom. Someone showed Brian the video at our table. I could picture it too clearly. Jennifer seated beneath chandeliers, wearing the black satin dress she had mentioned once on the phone. Brian beside her, smiling at donors and developers. Then someone leaning over with a phone saying, "Isn't this your mother?" My daughter caught not by love, but by embarrassment. I see, I said quietly. Mom, this thing is everywhere. I'm not sure everywhere is the right word. It's on Channel 6 and Channel 10, and someone from my office already texted me. Her voice lowered. They asked if Eleanor Whitmore was my mother. For many years, Jennifer had corrected me when I embarrassed her. Now, apparently, I had surprised her in public by being admirable. I suppose that must have been unexpected, I said. There was a pause. Perhaps she heard something in my voice. Perhaps not. Brian wants to know if the governor stayed long. He gave a speech. Yes, we saw part of it. He said you helped him get into college. Yes, you never told me that. No, I said. I suppose I didn't. Why, I looked across the kitchen at the proclamation. Because at the time you were 12 and I was trying to get dinner on the table. Because not every good deed becomes a family announcement. Because some parts of a mother's life happen while her child is looking away. But I only said, it was a long time ago. Jennifer breathed out again. This is huge, Mom. There it was. Huge. Not sweet anymore. Huge. I'm very tired, Jennifer. Right. Of course. Well, talk tomorrow. Brian thinks. She stopped herself. But I had heard enough. Brian thinks what silence? Nothing. Just that we should all get together soon. Celebrate properly. Celebrate properly. The phrase sat between us like a polished stone. That would be nice, I said, though I was not sure whether I meant it. After we hung up, I did not sleep for a long time. The next morning, the video had spread far beyond Brookhaven. Margaret called at 7:30 to tell me it had been shared by the State Teachers Association. A former student from Arizona sent a message, another from Maine, one from Germany where she was stationed with her husband. People I had not heard from in decades wrote paragraphs about small moments I barely remembered, but they had carried for half their lives. You told me I was not lazy, just scared. You wrote a recommendation letter when my own parents said college was a waste. You bought my senior pictures and pretended the school had extra funds. You sat beside me after my brother died. Each message was a candle. By noon, the candles felt like a sunrise. Then Jennifer called again. This time, her tone had changed. It was softer, but not naturally soft. More careful. Like someone walking across thin ice. Mom, how are you feeling today? I'm all right. You must be overwhelmed. A little. I was thinking, she said, and I heard the familiar shift into planning mode. Maybe we should do dinner this weekend. You, me, Brian, Emily? Somewhere nice? Maybe the Oak Room. The Oak Room was one of those restaurants where the lighting was low, the plates were large, and the portions were small. Jennifer loved it because important people went there. I usually don't go out on Saturdays, I said. Mom, come on. This is special. Special. Yesterday, my ceremony had been inconvenient. Today, my recognition was special. Before I could answer, she continued. Also, Brian says we should invite a few people. Just close friends. Maybe the Petersons, maybe Councilman Hayes and his wife. People would love to meet you after all this. There it was, the small hook beneath the sweetness. I sat down slowly. Jennifer, I thought you said family dinner. It would still be family dinner. Just with a few extra people who admire what happened. What happened? I repeated. You know what I mean. I'm not sure I do. She sighed. Mom, please don't make this difficult. Everyone is excited for you. Let us be excited too. I wanted to believe her. A mother's heart is a dangerous thing. It will search for sincerity even in places where experience has taught it to be cautious. I wanted to believe my daughter had seen the video and felt proud. I wanted to believe something in the governor's speech had reminded her of who I used to be before I became, in her eyes, merely old. But Brian's name hung over the conversation like smoke. What does Brian want? I asked. Jennifer's tone sharpened. Why would you ask that? Because you said Brian thinks we should get together. Brian says we should invite people. Brian seems to have many thoughts about my evening. He's trying to help. Because you said Brian thinks we should get together. Brian says we should invite people. Brian seems to have many thoughts about my evening. He's trying to help. Help whom? Another silence. Then she said, Mom, you don't understand how valuable this kind of attention can be. There it was, clean and plain. Valuable, not meaningful, not healing. Valuable. My hand tightened around the phone. Jennifer, I said carefully, last week, you told me local awards dinners were cold, chicken and speeches. That's not fair. It is accurate. I didn't know it would be this. No, I said. You didn't. The moment stretched. Then quietly she said, Are you trying to punish me for not coming? That question hurt because part of me wished I were that simple. Anger would have been easier than grief. Punishment would have felt stronger than disappointment. No, I said. I am trying to understand why you want to come close now. Her voice changed again, this time wounded. I'm your daughter. Yes, I whispered, you are. For years that fact had been enough for me to keep reaching. But that morning, for the first time, I wondered whether love without respect was slowly starving me. We ended the call politely. Too politely. By late afternoon, Jennifer's world had fully noticed me. She texted me a screenshot from her company's internal newsletter. Someone had shared an article about the ceremony, noting that their marketing director's mother had been honored by the governor. Jennifer added, Isn't this crazy? Crazy! Not beautiful. Not moving. Crazy. Brian sent a message too, which surprised me, because he rarely contacted me directly. Eleanor, congratulations. Impressive night. Would love to discuss potential community partnership opportunities sometime soon. No period after congratulations. Business before warmth. That was Brian. I did not answer. Instead, I turned off the phone and walked into the living room. The late afternoon sun was spilling across the floorboards, touching the edges of Robert's old recliner. I stood before the mantel, where I had placed one photograph from the ceremony. In it, Governor Reynolds was holding both my hands. I looked stunned, tearful, almost fragile, but I also looked seen. That was the part that frightened me. Once a person has been seen clearly, it becomes harder to accept being dismissed. That evening, Emily called from her own phone. Grandma. Her voice was trembling. Hi, sweetheart. I watched the whole speech. I sat down. You did? Yes. Mom only watched clips, but I found the full video. She sniffed. Grandma? I'm so sorry I wasn't there. Oh, honey, that wasn't your fault. I wanted to be. I know. Another small silence. Then Emily said, Mom was really weird after. She kept asking why you never told us about the governor. Brian said this could open doors. My chest tightened. What did your mother say? She didn't say much, but she looked, I don't know, shocked? Maybe embarrassed? I looked toward the kitchen table where the bouquet still stood in full bloom. She has her own feelings to sort through, I said. Emily lowered her voice. Grandma, don't let them use you. The words struck me harder than I expected. At 16, Emily had said what I had been afraid to admit. I love your mother, I said. I know, but you can love someone and still not let them hurt you. I closed my eyes. How strange to hear wisdom from a child when I had spent my life trying to give it. After we hung up, I sat in the quiet again, but it was not the same quiet as before. Not the empty quiet of widowhood, not the aching quiet of being forgotten. This was the quiet before a storm, because Jennifer was coming back into my life. Not slowly, not gently, not with the humble steps of a daughter seeking forgiveness. She was coming quickly, pulled by attention, reputation, and whatever opportunity Brian thought he could smell from miles away. And I knew then that the ceremony had not ended the story. It had only opened a door. The real test would be what my daughter did after stepping through it. Jennifer chose the Oak Room for dinner because, as she put it, you deserve something elegant. I almost laughed when she said it. For years, elegance had been something she used as a wall between us. My house was not elegant enough. My clothes were not elegant enough. My church potluck casseroles were not elegant enough. Even my way of speaking plain and warm, and sometimes too honest, had embarrassed her in rooms where people softened their cruelty with polished vocabulary. But now, apparently, I deserved elegance. The Oak Room was downtown on the top floor of the Belmont Hotel. Its windows overlooked the city courthouse, the river, and the old railway bridge glowing with lights after sunset. The host wore a black suit and spoke in a voice so low it seemed trained. The tablecloths were white, the candles were real, and the menu did not list prices. Jennifer had made the reservation for 6:30 on Saturday. I arrived at 6:25. Old habits. Teachers are rarely late. I wore the same navy dress from the ceremony, though I changed the pearl clips for a simple silver barrette. Before leaving, I stood in front of the mirror and reminded myself that I was not going to that restaurant as a decoration for my daughter's new story. I was going as myself. That sounded brave in my bedroom. It felt less brave when I stepped out of the elevator and saw Jennifer waiting near the host stand. She looked beautiful. She always did. Her honey blonde hair was swept into a low twist, and she wore a soft blue dress with a cream coat over her shoulders. For one painful second, I saw the little girl who used to twirl in front of me after I bought her Easter shoes from the department store clearance rack. Then she saw me. "Mom," she said, and came forward with open arms. The hug surprised me. It was not the quick, careful embrace she usually gave, the kind meant to avoid wrinkling clothes or smudging makeup. This one lasted almost 2 full seconds longer than expected. Her perfume was expensive and floral. Her cheek brushed mine. "You look lovely," she said. "Thank you." "So do you." She stepped back, studying me, as if trying to locate something new. "Everyone has been talking about you." I smiled gently. "That seems to be the problem." Her expression flickered, but before she could answer, Brian appeared behind her. He wore a charcoal suit and his usual confident smile, the one that made people feel he was already halfway through selling them something. "Eleanor," he said warmly, too warmly. "Woman of the hour?" He leaned down to kiss my cheek. I smelled bourbon and aftershave. "Hello, Brian." Emily rushed in, last nearly breathless, her dark hair loose over her shoulders. She was wearing a green sweater and black skirt, and unlike the others, she did not try to control her face. Her eyes were already wet. "Grandma." She hugged me so tightly I had to steady myself. "Oh, sweetheart," I whispered, holding the back of her head. "I'm sorry," she murmured. "You have nothing to be sorry for." When she pulled away, she wiped quickly under one eye. Jennifer noticed and looked uncomfortable, as if genuine emotion might disturb the lighting. The host led us to a corner table with a view of the river. For the first few minutes, conversation stayed safely polished. Jennifer asked whether I had received more messages. Brian asked how many news stations had contacted me. Emily asked whether Governor Reynolds had really remembered the Navy tie. "He did?" I said, smiling, though I wish he had left that part out. I sounded like a terrible liar. Emily laughed. "A sweet liar." Brian leaned back. "It's remarkable, Eleanor. Truly. People spend fortunes trying to build that kind of public goodwill." There it was again. Goodwill, as if kindness were a brand asset. Jennifer shot him a small look. He cleared his throat and reached for his water glass. "I just mean," he added, "it's rare. Authentic stories matter, only if they're actually treated as stories," I said, "not opportunities." The table fell quiet. Emily looked down at her plate, hiding the smallest smile. Jennifer placed her napkin in her lap with great care. "Mom, no one is trying to turn you into an opportunity." I looked at her. "Then why are we here?" Her lips parted slightly. "Because we wanted to celebrate you." "Did you?" The question came out softer than I expected. Not sharp. That made it worse. Jennifer looked away first. The waiter arrived, saving her from answering. We ordered. Brian chose wine without asking whether I wanted any. Jennifer complimented the restaurant. Emily kept glancing between us, worried and hopeful. When the waiter left, Jennifer folded her hands on the table. "I know I hurt you by not coming," she said. It was the first honest sentence of the evening. I waited. "I didn't understand what the ceremony meant," she continued. "I thought it was just, I don't know, a small local thing." "A small local thing can still matter," I said. "I know." But she said it too quickly. I studied my daughter's face. There were fine lines near her eyes, now faint but real. She was not a little girl. She was a grown woman old enough to know that dismissing someone's joy because it did not impress her friends was cruelty wearing sensible shoes. "I wanted you there because you are my daughter," I said. Not because the governor came. Not because cameras came. Not because people talked about it afterward. I wanted you there before anyone else thought it mattered. Her eyes shifted toward the window. Brian reached for his wine. "Eleanor, I think everyone understands that, but sometimes families miss things. The important part is what happens next." I turned to him. "And what do you think should happen next, Brian?" He smiled, but his fingers tightened around the glass stem. "Well, I think you have a chance to expand the impact of this scholarship. With the right partnerships, the right donor network, may be even some development tie-ins." He smiled, but his fingers tightened around the glass stem. "Well, I think you have a chance to expand the impact of this scholarship. With the right partnerships, the right donor network, maybe even some development tie-ins." "Development tie-ins," Emily said, frowning. Brian ignored her. "There are several people who would love to be associated with a story like yours. We could arrange a luncheon. Perhaps invite Governor Reynolds if—" "No," I said. The word was quiet, but final. Brian blinked. "I'm not saying immediately." "I am saying no immediately." Jennifer's cheeks flushed. "Mom, he's just brainstorming." "No," I said again. He is not brainstorming. He is calculating. Brian sat back as if I had slapped him. Jennifer's eyes flashed. That is unfair. Is it? Yes. Brian respects what happened. I looked at my son-in-law. Do you? Brian? His jaw tightened. Of course. Then tell me what happened. He gave a short laugh. What do you mean? I mean, tell me what happened. Not the headline, not the publicity value. Tell me what the governor said that mattered to you. The silence that followed was so complete, I could hear the soft clink of silverware at the next table. Brian opened his mouth, then closed it. Jennifer looked embarrassed for him. Emily looked at him with something close to disappointment. Finally, Brian said, He said you helped him when he was young. Yes, I replied. And why did that matter? He did not answer. I turned back to Jennifer. Did you watch the whole speech? Her face changed. There it was. The truth before the lie. Most of it, she said. Emily's eyes lifted. I looked at my granddaughter. She did not speak, but her expression told me enough. Jennifer had not watched the whole speech. The realization did not surprise me. That was the sad part. It simply landed on top of all the other small griefs and made the pile heavier. I see, I said. Jennifer leaned forward. Mom, please. I have been getting messages from people all day. I was trying to catch up. I didn't have time to sit through every minute, but I'm proud of you. Are you? Her eyes filled suddenly, and for the first time that evening, I did not know whether the tears were anger, shame, or something softer. Yes, she said. I am. I wanted to believe her so badly that my chest hurt. The food arrived beautifully arranged and nearly impossible to enjoy. For a while, we ate in strained silence. Emily asked me about the scholarship, and I told her what little I knew. She listened with real interest. What kind of students will it help? She asked. The kind who almost give up, I said. She nodded slowly. I like that. So do I. Jennifer watched us, her expression unreadable. After dinner, Brian excused himself to take a call. He claimed it was urgent, though no phone had rung. Once he was gone, the air at the table changed. It became less polished, more human. Emily reached across the table and touched my hand. Grandma, I wish I had been there. I know, sweetheart. Jennifer looked down. She begged me to let her go. The confession surprised both of us, I think. Emily stiffened. Mom. No, Jennifer said quietly. It's true. I waited. Jennifer swallowed. She asked twice, maybe 3 times. I told her she had finals to focus on, but that wasn't the whole reason. What was the reason? I asked. My daughter's fingers twisted her napkin. I didn't want to go, she said, and I didn't want to feel guilty for going somewhere else while she came to support you. There it was. Not a full apology, not yet, but a crack in the wall. Emily's face softened. I looked at Jennifer, and for a moment I saw not the polished marketing director, not Brian's wife, not the woman who called my life small. I saw my child still carrying some old hurt she had never learned how to put down. Thank you for telling the truth, I said. She gave a small broken laugh. I don't think I deserve thanks for that. Sometimes truth is the first decent brick in a bridge. Her eyes filled again. This time I believed them a little more. Then Brian returned. The wall came back up. He slid into his chair, smiling, as if the last 10 minutes had not existed. Sorry about that. Eleanor. I had a thought. Emily closed her eyes. Jennifer stiffened. I folded my hands in my lap and looked at him calmly. I'm sure you did, I said. Brian either did not hear the warning in my voice or chose to ignore it. "There's a fundraising reception next month," he said. "A very influential crowd. If you could simply introduce me to Governor Reynolds, nothing formal, just a handshake." Jennifer whispered Brian, "Not now." But it was too late. The truth had finally stepped fully into the room. He had not come to celebrate me. He had come to reach past me. I looked at my daughter, waiting to see what she would do. For the first time in years, the next wound would not be caused by what Jennifer said to me. It would be caused by whether she defended me. Brian's request sat in the middle of the table like a spilled glass no one wanted to clean up. "If you could simply introduce me to Governor Reynolds," he had said, as if the governor were an elevator button I could press for him. "Nothing formal, just a handshake." I looked at Jennifer first. Not Brian, Jennifer. Because by then I understood something painful. Brian's ambition was not new. His manners had always been polished around people he considered useful and thin around people he did not. What mattered now was not whether Brian would try to use me. I already knew he would. What mattered was whether my daughter would let him. Jennifer's eyes stayed fixed on the tablecloth. Her fingers were still twisted around the edge of her napkin. She looked trapped between loyalty to her husband and shame in front of her mother. "Brian," she said quietly, "this isn't the time." He gave her a sharp little smile. "I'm not asking for a campaign endorsement, Jen. I'm asking for a courtesy introduction. A courtesy to whom, I asked." He turned back to me. "Eleanor, you're misunderstanding me. I don't think I am." His smile tightened. "Governor Reynolds clearly respects you. That respect could help draw attention to projects that benefit the community. Affordable housing, commercial development, public-private partnerships. Your developments," Emily said. Her voice was soft, but it cut straight through the room. Brian looked at his daughter with irritation. "Emily, this is an adult conversation. She is 16, I said. "Not invisible." Emily's eyes flickered toward me, grateful and scared. Jennifer finally lifted her head. "Brian, maybe we should drop it." "Why?" he asked. "Because your mother thinks I'm some kind of villain for recognizing an opportunity." "No one called you a villain," Jennifer said. He laughed under his breath. "She didn't have to." I placed my hands flat on my lap, feeling the smooth fabric of my dress beneath my palms. I had stood in classrooms with furious parents grieving children, arrogant principals, and school board members who believed test scores mattered more than hungry students. I knew how to stay calm when someone tried to make noise bigger than truth. "Brian," I said, "when Michael was 17, he needed help because life was crushing him. I helped him because he was a child standing too close to despair. Not because I thought he might one day become powerful." "I never said you did. But you are interested now because he became powerful." His face hardened. "That's unfair," he said. "No, it is uncomfortable. That is not the same thing." Jennifer inhaled softly. Across the restaurant, a waiter moved past carrying a tray of desserts. The candle between us flickered. Around us, people laughed quietly over expensive wine, completely unaware that an entire family was beginning to split open at table 14. Brian leaned forward. "You know, Eleanor, with all due respect, you may not understand how influence works." There it was, with all due respect. The phrase people use right before removing respect entirely. "I understand influence very well," I said. He blinked. "I spent 43 years in a classroom. Every word I spoke had influence. Every child I encouraged, corrected, protected, or overlooked carried some part of that influence forward. I understand it enough to know it is not something to spend carelessly." Brian's jaw moved. Jennifer looked at me, then really looked, and for a second I saw confusion in her face, as if she were realizing there were entire rooms inside me she had never entered. Brian turned to her. "Are you hearing this?" I'm trying to help expand her scholarship, and somehow I'm the bad guy. Jennifer did not answer. Jen? He pressed. Say something. She swallowed. I think Mom has a right to say no. It was not a strong defense. It was not brave. But it was something. Brian stared at her as if she had betrayed him in public. Seriously, Jennifer's cheeks reddened. Yes, seriously. His laugh was cold. That's rich. 2 days ago, you were asking me whether this could help your company's foundation partnership. My daughter went still. Emily's eyes widened. I felt the words enter me slowly like cold water spreading through cloth. Jennifer whispered Brian, but he was angry now, and angry people often tell truths they had planned to keep hidden. No, let's be honest, he said. You were thrilled when those executives started texting you. You said maybe this would finally make people at work see you as more than the woman running regional campaigns. You said your mother's story could be good for your visibility. Jennifer's face drained of color. I looked down at my hands. My mother's story. Good for your visibility. For a moment, I did not trust myself to speak. The restaurant sounds faded. I could hear only my pulse and the soft tremble of Emily's breath. I thought of Jennifer as a little girl falling asleep in my lap while I graded essays. I thought of the purple crayon flower in my Bible. I thought of all the times I had defended her coldness to myself. She is busy. She is stressed. She is different from me. She does not mean to hurt me. But there comes a time when excuses stop being mercy and start becoming lies. Jennifer reached toward me. Mom! I didn't mean it like that. I pulled my hand back before she touched me. Her eyes filled. Please, she said. I was overwhelmed. Everyone was calling. People at work were making comments. I didn't know how to process it. I looked at her. So you processed it as an advantage. She flinched. Brian sat back, realizing perhaps that he had done more damage than intended. But instead of apologizing, he took refuge in arrogance. Look, he said, every family benefits when one member gains recognition. That's not ugly. That's reality. No, I said quietly. That is your reality. He opened his mouth, but I turned fully toward my daughter. Jennifer, do you remember what you said when I invited you to the ceremony? Tears slid down her face now, but she nodded. You said those local awards dinners were speeches cold chicken and people clapping for every volunteer who ever baked cookies. Mom, you said you did not want me expecting you and then being disappointed. Her chin trembled. I was disappointed before the ceremony ever began, I said. Not because there were cameras, not because the governor came. I was disappointed because my daughter could not make room in her evening for something that mattered to me. I know. No, I said, my voice breaking at last. You know now because other people told you it mattered. That is not the same. Emily began to cry silently. Jennifer covered her mouth with one hand. Brian muttered, "This is getting dramatic." I turned to him with a calm I did not feel. Do not mistake pain for drama. He looked away first. I reached for my purse and removed enough cash to cover what I guessed was my portion of the dinner. I placed the bills beside my plate. Jennifer stared at the money. Mom, don't do that. I will not have you pay for a dinner where I was invited as an apology and treated as a connection. That's not what this was, wasn't it? She had no answer. I stood slowly. Emily stood too. Grandma let me come with you. Jennifer looked at her daughter sharply. Emily, sit down. Emily did not sit. There was a small revolution in that moment. Not loud, not disrespectful. Just a young girl choosing tenderness over obedience. I want to walk Grandma downstairs, Emily said. Jennifer seemed too stunned to object. Brian shook his head. Unbelievable. Emily turned to him, tears shining on her cheeks. No, Dad. What's unbelievable is that Governor Reynolds treated Grandma with more respect after 40 years than you did after 10 minutes. The silence after that was absolute. Then Emily took my arm. I let her. We walked out of the oak room together, past the host stand, past the polished bar, past people who would never know they had witnessed the moment. A granddaughter became braver than both her parents. In the elevator, Emily leaned against me and cried. I'm sorry, she said again and again. I held her close. You did nothing wrong. Mom loves you, she whispered. I know she does. She's just lost. I looked at our reflection in the elevator doors. An old woman in navy, a young girl with wet eyes, 2 generations holding each other while the one between us struggled to understand love without status attached. I know, I said. But knowing did not make it hurt less. At the lobby entrance, Emily called a taxi for me. While we waited, she held my hand as if I might disappear. Grandma, she said, are you going to forgive Mom? I looked out at the city lights trembling on the wet pavement. Somewhere above us, Jennifer was still sitting at that table with Brian, perhaps crying, perhaps defending herself, perhaps angry at me for making the truth too visible. I don't know, I said honestly. Forgiveness is not a door you can kick open. Sometimes it is a road. And sometimes the person who hurt you has to decide whether they are willing to walk it. Emily nodded through tears. When the taxi arrived, she hugged me one more time. As I rode home, I did not feel victorious. That is something people misunderstand about standing up for yourself. It does not always feel powerful. Sometimes it feels like leaving behind the last version of hope you had been clinging to. But beneath the sadness, there was something else. A thin, steady line of peace. For the first time in years, I had not begged my daughter to value me. I had simply refused to let her use me. And painful as that was, it felt like the beginning of getting myself back. The next morning, I woke before sunrise with the strange heaviness that follows an argument no one truly wins. The house was still dark. A thin blue light pressed against the curtains, and the old clock in the hallway ticked with the steady patience of things that had survived longer than human pride. For a while, I lay in bed listening to the quiet, wondering if Jennifer had slept at all. I doubted it. I had seen her face when Brian exposed what she had said about my story helping her visibility. Shame had crossed it before anger could cover it. I knew that look because I had worn it myself in different moments of life. Shame is the soul recognizing itself before the mouth can explain. Around 7, I made coffee and sat at the kitchen table. The proclamation still leaned against the fruit bowl. The flowers from the ceremony had begun to open wider, filling the room with a soft, sweet smell. I should have felt proud looking at them. Instead, I felt tired. Not the kind of tired sleep can fix. By 8:30, there was a knock at the front door. I knew before opening it. Jennifer stood on the porch in jeans, a gray sweater, and no makeup. Her hair was pulled back loosely, and her eyes were swollen. Without the polished clothes, without Brian beside her, without the sharp confidence she wore, like armor, she looked younger. She looked like my daughter. "Can I come in?" she asked. I stepped aside. She entered slowly, as if the house itself might reject her. Her eyes moved over the living room, the framed family photographs, Robert's recliner, the quilt folded over the sofa. This was the house she had once called old. The house where I had measured her height on the pantry doorframe. The house where her father had taught her to ride a bicycle in the driveway. "Coffee?" I asked. She nodded. We sat across from each other at the kitchen table. For several minutes, neither of us spoke. I poured her coffee into the yellow mug she used to claim as hers when she was in high school. She noticed it immediately. "You kept this?" "Of course." Her fingers closed around it. Then she began to cry. Not delicately, not prettily. She put one hand over her face and cried like someone whose pride had finally run out of breath. I sat still, my own eyes burning, but I did not rush to comfort her. There are tears that ask for arms, and there are tears that ask to be witnessed. "I'm sorry," she whispered. I waited. "I'm sorry I didn't come. I'm sorry I made your night about me. I'm sorry I let Brian talk that way. I'm sorry I only understood it mattered after other people made it important." Her words shook, but they were clear. "I'm listening," I said. She lowered her hand. I was jealous. That was not what I expected. "Jealous?" She gave a broken laugh. "Isn't that awful? My mother gets honored by the governor, and instead of just being happy, I felt embarrassed that I didn't know. Then jealous that everyone else seemed to understand you better than I did." I looked down at my coffee. Jennifer continued. "When people at the benefit started showing us the video, I felt exposed. Like everyone could see I hadn't been there. Like everyone could see what kind of daughter I was. That must have been painful. It was deserved. Pain and deserving are not always the same thing." She wiped her cheeks. "Mom, why didn't you tell me about all those students? About Governor Reynolds? About the lunches, the scholarship essays, the things you paid for?" I looked toward the window above the sink. Outside, a cardinal landed on the fence, bright red against the pale morning. "Because I didn't do them to be remembered." "I know, but I'm your daughter." "Yes," I said softly. "And perhaps I should have told you more." Her eyes lifted. I took a long breath. "There are things you need to know, Jennifer. Not to excuse your behavior. Not to make myself a saint. But because silence has built too many walls between us." She sat very still. "When you were growing up, our money was tighter than you knew. Your father and I protected you from most of it. There were months when we delayed repairs, stretched groceries, paid bills late. I was helping students, yes, but I was also trying to hold our own home together." Jennifer's brow furrowed. "I knew we weren't rich." "No, but you didn't know your father worked extra shifts when the hardware store allowed it. You didn't know I sold my mother's gold bracelet to pay for a student's application fees and your winter coat in the same week." Her lips parted. "You sold Grandma Rose's bracelet?" I nodded. "That bracelet was supposed to be mine someday." "I know." Pain flashed across her face. "I was wrong not to tell you," I said. "At the time, I told myself you were too young to carry adult burdens. Then later I told myself it no longer mattered. But maybe it did matter. Maybe you saw things disappear and thought I chose other people over you." She looked away quickly. There it was. The wound. "I did," she whispered. My heart tightened. "When I was little," she said, "I thought your students got the best of you. They got your patience, your encouragement, your after-school time, your proud voice. By the time you came home, you were tired. You still loved me. I know that. But sometimes, I felt like I was waiting in line behind every broken kid in Brookhaven." The words hurt more because they were not entirely false. "I am sorry," I said. She began crying again, quieter now. "I hated myself for feeling that way. They needed you. I knew they needed you, but I needed you too." I reached across the table then and took her hand. "I know. No." She began crying again, quieter now. "I hated myself for feeling that way. They needed you. I knew they needed you, but I needed you too." I reached across the table then and took her hand. "I know." "No," she said. "You didn't." because I never said it. I just turned it into resentment. Then I grew up and decided if your world had made me feel small, I would build a world where I looked important. My daughter had finally opened a door, and behind it was not cruelty alone. It was a child's loneliness hardened over decades. That does not excuse how you treated me, I said gently. I know. Or how you let Brian speak to me. I know that too. I squeezed her hand. But it helps me understand. She looked at me then fully. Did you really sell jewelry to help students? Yes. What else? I hesitated. Then I told her. I told her about the grocery cards Robert and I slipped into lockers before Christmas break. I told her about buying prom shoes for a girl whose father had lost his job. I told her about driving a student's mother to a shelter after a domestic violence call because the police had left and she had nowhere to go. I told her about the night I stayed at the hospital with a boy whose parents were too drunk to answer the phone. Jennifer listened without interrupting. I also told her about the cost, the missed dinners, the late nights, the way compassion can become a form of absence if you do not guard it carefully. I admitted that sometimes I came home with an empty emotional basket and expected her to understand without explanation. That was not fair to you, I said. She shook her head. But I wasn't abandoned. No, I said firmly. You were never abandoned. I know that now. She looked around the kitchen. Dad was always there. You were there too, just tired. Tired mothers still owe their children tenderness. She cried again at that. For the first time in years, our conversation did not feel like two women defending separate versions of the past. It felt like two wounded people standing over the same broken object, finally admitting both had cut their hands on it. Then Jennifer whispered, I told myself you didn't care about appearances because you didn't understand the world. But maybe you understood something I lost. What was that? That people are not investments. I sat back slowly. Outside, the cardinal flew from the fence. Jennifer wiped her face. Brian was furious last night. He said you humiliated him. I did not humiliate him. I refused him. I know. Her voice became steadier. And I should have refused him too. What will you do now? She looked down at the yellow mug. I don't know yet. But I know I don't want Emily learning that love means using people. She was braver than I was last night. She loves you, I said. I know. That's what scares me. I don't want her to look at me someday the way I've been looking at you. For the first time that morning, I saw something real begin in Jennifer. Not a perfect transformation, not a clean redemption. Real change rarely enters like thunder. More often, it arrives like dawn, slowly revealing the mess in the room. I cannot pretend everything is healed, I said. I'm not asking you to. Trust will take time. I know, and I will not introduce Brian to Governor Reynolds. A faint, sad smile touched her mouth. Good. We sat there until the coffee went cold. Before she left, Jennifer walked into the living room and stood before Robert's photograph. I wish Dad had seen the ceremony, she said. So do I. She touched the frame lightly. He would have been proud of you. My throat tightened. He always was. Jennifer turned back to me, and this time her voice was small. I was too. I just buried it under the wrong things. I did not forgive her completely that morning. Life is not that simple. But when she hugged me at the door, I held on longer than I had planned. And for the first time since the governor took my hand, I understood that the most difficult recognition I would ever receive would not come from a stage, a proclamation, or a room full of applause. It would come from my own daughter, finally seeing the truth. Not only about me, about herself. 2 days after Jennifer came to my house, Emily arrived carrying a cardboard box. It was a Tuesday afternoon, gray and rainy, the kind of day that made the windows look older. I had been at the library most of the morning, helping Margaret sort donated books from an estate sale. When I came home, I found Emily sitting on my front porch steps with her knees tucked close, a hooded sweatshirt pulled over her hair, and the box beside her, protected under a plastic grocery bag. "Sweetheart," I called from the walkway, hurrying as fast as my knees allowed. "How long have you been sitting there?" "Only 10 minutes," she said, though the damp edges of her sleeves told me it had been longer. I unlocked the door and brought her inside. She set the box on the kitchen table with unusual care, as if it held glass. "Your mother knows you're here?" "Yes," she said quickly. "She drove me. That surprised me." "Jennifer drove you?" Emily nodded. "She's waiting in the car. She said this was something I should ask you first." I looked toward the front window. Through the rain, I could see Jennifer's SUV parked at the curb. The wipers moved back and forth slowly, like someone thinking. "What is it?" I asked. Emily pulled the plastic bag away from the box. It was an old file box from my attic. Blue cardboard softened at the corners with my handwriting across the lid. "Student letters /thank yous /keeps." My breath caught. "Where did you find that?" "In the attic," Emily said. "Mom came over yesterday while you were at the community center. She wanted to look for the video recording of Grandpa's retirement party because she said she wanted to hear his voice." My throat tightened. "She found this instead?" Emily nodded. "She didn't open much. She cried after the first few letters. Then she asked if I would help her bring it down, but we thought we should ask you before reading more." I placed one hand on the box. For decades, that box had traveled with me from classroom to home, from home office to attic, from one season of life to another. I had not hidden it exactly. I had simply placed it where memories go when they are too tender for daily use. "You may read them," I said softly. Emily's eyes widened. "Are you sure?" "Yes, but carefully. Those letters belong to people's younger selves." She nodded solemnly, understanding more than many adults would. I opened the lid. Inside were envelopes, cards, folded notebook pages, graduation announcements, photographs, postcards, and scraps of paper. Some were yellowed with age. Some were written in pencil. Some had stickers on them. Some were formal and careful. Others looked as if they had been written in a hurry before courage disappeared. Emily took the first letter from the top. It was from a student named Angela Harris, class of 1982. Emily unfolded it and began to read silently. Her face changed before she reached the end. "What does it say?" I asked gently. Emily cleared her throat and read aloud. "Dear Mrs. Whitmore, I know teachers probably hear thank you all the time, but I don't know how to say this without crying. When my mom left, I thought everyone would leave. You were the only adult who kept asking if I had eaten and if I had done my homework. You made me feel like I was not a problem to be solved, but a person worth staying for." Emily stopped. Her lips trembled. I remembered Angela. Thin braids, oversized sweaters, a fierce talent for poetry. She had become a social worker in Cleveland, if I recalled correctly. "She sent me a Christmas card for almost 20 years, I said. Emily touched the letter like it was sacred. We read another, then another. A young man thanking me for writing a letter to a judge after his first arrest, explaining that he was more than his worst decision. That he was more than his worst decision. A girl thanking me for quietly paying for her cap and gown. A student who had hidden bruises under long sleeves and wrote that I was the first person to ask, "Who did this to you?" A girl thanking me for quietly paying for her cap and gown. A student who had hidden bruises under long sleeves and wrote that I was the first person to ask, "Who did this to you?" instead of, "Why are you acting out?" By the fourth letter, Emily was openly crying. I was not much better. Then the front door opened. Jennifer stepped inside, rain clinging to her coat. She stood in the hallway for a moment, uncertain. "Is it okay if I come in?" she asked. Emily looked at me. I nodded. Jennifer removed her coat and came to the kitchen table. Her eyes immediately went to the open box. She sat down slowly, not across from me this time, but beside Emily. There was something different in that choice. "Mom, Jennifer said I read one yesterday. Just one. I shouldn't have done it without asking. Which one?" She reached carefully into the box and pulled out a folded sheet of lined paper. "This one." I recognized the handwriting before she opened it. Marcus Bell. The boy who worked nights at the gas station after his father went to prison. Jennifer read softly. "Mrs. Whitmore, I wanted to tell you I graduated from community college today. I almost didn't go to the ceremony because I thought nobody would care. Then I remembered you saying, 'Never make your loneliness do the speaking for you.' So I went. My mother cried. I cried too. I wish Mr. Whitmore could know that the money you both gave me for textbooks turned into something real." Jennifer looked up. "Dad helped too." "Yes." Her voice broke. "I never knew. He believed in what I did. He gave up things for it." I smiled sadly. "Your father gave up things for everyone he loved." Quietly. That was his way. Jennifer pressed the letter flat with her fingertips. "I spent years thinking he just went along with you because he was too kind to argue." "Oh, he argued," I said. A small, surprised laugh escaped her. "He argued about the electric bill, the roof, the old station wagon. He worried, but when it came down to whether a child needed help, Robert rarely turned away." Jennifer looked toward the living room where his photograph sat. I wish I had understood him better. So do I. For the next hour, the three of us sat at the kitchen table and read pieces of my past. Not all of them. There were too many. Hundreds. That number seemed to stun Jennifer. Every time she lifted another envelope, her face tightened with a new realization. These were not isolated acts, not one or two dramatic rescues. This had been a lifetime built from small salvations. There was a letter from a woman who became a nurse because I helped her pass English after she failed twice. A postcard from a man stationed in Iraq who wrote that my class was the first place he ever felt safe reading aloud. A photograph from twin sisters standing outside their first apartment, thanking me for connecting their family with emergency housing after a winter eviction. Emily found a small handmade card covered in faded stars. "Listen to this one," she said. "Dear Mrs. W., you said I could be the first person in my family to go to college." My uncle laughed when I told him. I almost believed him. "Then you looked at me like I him. Then you looked at me like I had already done it. I keep that look in my head when I want to quit." Jennifer covered her mouth. "That," she whispered, "is what Governor Reynolds meant." "Yes," I said. "I suppose it is. Had already done it. I keep that look in my head when I want to quit." Jennifer covered her mouth. "That," she whispered, "is what Governor Reynolds meant." "Yes," I said. "I suppose it is." She looked at me, tears shining. "You gave people a version of themselves they couldn't see yet." I did not know what to say to that. Then Emily reached deeper into the box and pulled out an envelope with no stamp. Just my name written across the front in blue ink. Mrs. Whitmore. Inside was a letter from Michael Reynolds, written during his first year of college. His handwriting had been neater than most boys his age, though still tense, still careful. Emily handed it to me. "Can you read it?" I unfolded it, my hands trembling slightly. "Dear Mrs. Whitmore, I made it through my first semester. I wanted to quit 3 times. The first time was when I got a C on a paper and thought it proved I did not belong here. The second time was when I ran out of money and ate crackers for 2 days. The third time was when a boy in my dorm said people like me only get in because someone feels sorry for us. I did not quit because I heard your voice telling me that shame is a liar with a loud mouth. I read that sentence twice because my eyes blurred. Jennifer began to cry. The letter continued. I don't know what I will become. Maybe a lawyer, maybe a teacher, maybe just a man who can help his mother stop working so hard. But whatever I become, I need you to know that you are part of it. I lowered the letter. For a moment, the kitchen was silent, except for rain tapping the windows. Jennifer whispered, I thought you were choosing them over me. I looked at her. She shook her head slowly, as if trying to dislodge an old belief from deep inside her. But you weren't choosing them over me. You were trying to keep people from drowning. I should have made sure you knew you were not losing me, I said. She reached for my hand, and I should have asked instead of punishing you for years. Emily wiped her cheeks. Maybe both things can be true. I smiled at her through tears. Yes, they often are. That afternoon became one of the strangest and most sacred days of my life. We made tea. Jennifer took off her shoes. Emily sat cross-legged on a kitchen chair the way she used to when she was little. The rain kept falling, softening the world outside, while the past opened between us letter by letter. At some point, Jennifer found a photograph tucked inside an envelope. It showed me in room 214, kneeling beside a little girl at a family literacy night. Jennifer was standing in the background, maybe 11 years old, holding a stack of books. Her expression in the picture was not angry. It was proud. Jennifer stared at it for a long time. I remember this night, she said. You do? She nodded. I helped pass out cookies. You told everyone I was your best assistant. You were. Her mouth trembled. When did I stop remembering the good parts? I touched her shoulder. Sometimes pain edits memory. She leaned into my hand. Not much. Just enough. Before they left, Jennifer asked if she could borrow a few letters. Not to post. Not to show Brian. Not for work. She wanted to read them alone and understand. I gave her 5. At the door, she hugged the letters to her chest. I don't deserve to know all this, she said. Maybe not. I answered gently, but healing often begins with knowing what we do not deserve. She nodded, crying again. After they left, I returned to the kitchen table and looked at the open box. The letters were still scattered across the surface, fragile and alive. I thought they had been memories of my teaching career. I understood now they were something else too. Witnesses, not only to what I had done for others, but to what my daughter had never been able to see. And now, finally, the truth had begun speaking for itself. Jennifer did not ask for forgiveness that same day. That was how I knew something had truly begun to change. The old Jennifer would have wanted the matter settled quickly. She would have cried, apologized, waited for me to soften, and then expected life to return to normal by dessert. She had always liked clean endings. Messy emotions made her uncomfortable, especially when they could not be managed with the right words. But this time, she did not rush me. For nearly a week after we read the letters, she called every evening. Not long calls. Sometimes only 10 minutes. Sometimes less. She asked how I was feeling, whether I had eaten dinner, whether the library needed volunteers, whether Emily could come by after school. The first few calls felt awkward. We were both careful, like people walking through a room after something fragile had shattered on the floor. One evening she said, Mom, I watched the governor's full speech. I stood in the kitchen holding a dish towel and closed my eyes. All of it, I asked. All of it. And her voice trembled. I had to pause 3 times. I said nothing. I think the part that hurt most was when he said you refused to let him disappear. She took a shaky breath. Because I realized that for years I had been trying to make you disappear from the parts of my life where I wanted to look impressive. The words landed quietly but deeply. Thank you for telling me that, I said. I'm ashamed. I know. I don't want you to make me feel better about it. That surprised me, so I did not. Another evening, she told me she had spoken to Emily. Really spoken, she said. Not just asked about school or volleyball. I asked her what she felt when I wouldn't let her attend your ceremony. I sat down slowly. What did she say? She said she felt like I was teaching her that love had to fit around appearances. My heart ached for both of them. Jennifer's voice broke. I did that, didn't I? You did. She cried softly. I told her I was sorry. She hugged me, but I could tell she doesn't fully trust me either. Trust is not rebuilt because we want it quickly, I said. I know. And she did not argue. That was new too. On Friday afternoon, Jennifer came to my house alone. She brought no flowers, no restaurant reservations, no expensive pastry box meant to smooth over discomfort. Just herself and a small notebook. I opened the door, and she lifted it with a shy expression. I wrote some things down because I don't want to hide behind emotion and forget what I need to say. I stepped aside. Come in. We sat in the living room this time. Rain had passed earlier, leaving the windows bright and wet. The house smelled faintly of lemon polish because I had cleaned that morning to settle my nerves. Jennifer sat on the edge of the sofa, notebook in her lap, like a schoolgirl about to read an assignment. For a moment, I almost smiled. Then I remembered how much pain had brought us here. She opened the notebook. I want to apologize without asking you to comfort me, she began. My throat tightened. I ignored your invitation because I did not value what mattered to you. I judged your ceremony before I understood it. Then when other people honored you, I suddenly wanted to be close to you, not because I had become a better daughter overnight, but because your recognition made me feel important too. She swallowed hard, but kept going. I let Brian treat your relationship with Governor Reynolds like a business opportunity. I did not stop him fast enough. Worse part of me agreed with him before I was willing to admit it. I thought about how your story could help me at work. That was wrong. It was ugly, and it was not love. A tear slipped down her cheek. I stayed still. She turned a page. I also want to apologize for years of small humiliations, for correcting your clothes, for acting embarrassed when you brought homemade food, for calling you Eleanor when I wanted distance, for making you feel like your life was less sophisticated than mine. I thought I was becoming successful, but somewhere along the way, I became cruel in polished language. That one pierced me. Cruel in polished language. Yes, that was exactly what it had been. Jennifer looked up from the notebook. Mom, I am sorry. The room fell silent. Outside, a car passed slowly through the wet street. Somewhere in the house, the refrigerator hummed. I looked at my daughter, sitting before me stripped of performance, and I felt 2 truths living side by side. I loved her, and she had hurt me deeply. For years, I had believed love required me to swallow the second truth so I could protect the first. But I was beginning to understand that real love could survive honesty. In fact, maybe it required it. I believe your apology is sincere, I said. Her shoulders loosened slightly. But I am not ready to say everything is forgiven. She nodded quickly, though pain flashed across her face. I understand. I need you to hear me. I am not withholding forgiveness to punish you. I know I am telling the truth about where my heart is. She pressed her lips together and nodded again. For a long time, I continued. I made excuses for you because I was afraid that naming the hurt would make it bigger. But silence made it bigger. I need time, Jennifer. I need to see change when no one is watching. Not just toward me, but toward Emily, toward yourself, and even toward Brian. Her fingers tightened around the notebook. I don't know what to do about Brian, she whispered. That is your marriage. I will not tell you what choice to make. He thinks I'm overreacting. What do you think? She looked toward the window. I think I have been underreacting for years. That answer stayed in the room between us. Then she said, Has not a monster. I never said he was. He can be generous. He works hard. He loves Emily in his way. I believe that. But he measures people constantly. Her voice became quieter. And I learned to do it too. I leaned back in Robert's old recliner. We all learn from the rooms we stay in too long. Jennifer looked at me then. Did you learn that from teaching? I learned it from living. She gave a faint, sad smile. Then I took my own breath. There is something I need to apologize for, too. Her eyes widened. Mom? No. Yes, I said gently. Let me. She closed her mouth. When you were young, I thought loving you meant protecting you from difficulty. I did not tell you when money was tight. I did not explain why I helped certain students. I did not always notice when my work made you feel secondary. I assumed that because I packed your lunches, attended your concerts, and loved you fiercely, you automatically felt secure. Jennifer's eyes filled again. But children do not only need to be loved, I continued. They need to understand where they belong in that love. I failed sometimes at showing you that. She shook her head, crying. You were a good mother. But children do not only need to be loved, I continued. They need to understand where they belong in that love. I failed sometimes at showing you that. She shook her head, crying. You were a good mother. I was a loving mother. Good mothers can still fail. She covered her face. I am sorry, I said. Not for helping those students. I cannot be sorry for that. But I am sorry for not helping you understand that my care for them did not reduce my love for you. Jennifer bent forward and cried into her hands. This time, I moved to sit beside her. Not because everything was fixed, because she was still my child. I put my arm around her shoulders, and she leaned into me the way she had when she was small and feverish. Her body shook with sobs. I missed you, she whispered. I closed my eyes. I was right here. I know. That's what makes it worse. We sat that way for a long time. Later, when the tears had quieted, Jennifer wiped her face and gave a shaky laugh. I thought this would feel better. Healing often feels like cleaning an old wound, I said. It stings before it closes. She looked at me. Do you think we can get there? I think we can begin. She nodded slowly. What do you need from me? The question was simple, but it mattered. I need honesty, I said. I need consistency. I need you not to treat my life as valuable only when other people applaud it. I need you not to use my relationship with Michael, and I need you to stop teaching Emily that image matters more than kindness. I can do that. Do not promise quickly." She paused. Then she said, "I will work on doing that." That was better. Before she left, Jennifer stood in the doorway and looked back at the living room. Her eyes rested on Robert's photograph, then on the box of letters I had moved to the side table. "Can I come with you to the library next week?" she asked. I studied her face. There was no camera there. No governor, no Brian, no networking. Just a daughter asking to enter the ordinary place where her mother's life had continued without her. "Yes," I said. "You can." She smiled small and uncertain. After she drove away, I stood on the porch until her car disappeared around the corner. I did not feel healed. Not yet. But I felt something honest beneath the ache. A beginning. The following Wednesday, Jennifer came to the library. I saw her through the front windows before she saw me. She stood on the sidewalk for a moment, holding a canvas tote bag in one hand and smoothing her blouse with the other. She looked nervous, which was something I had not seen in years. Jennifer was usually the kind of woman who entered rooms as if she had already approved the lighting, the schedule, and the seating arrangement. But that morning, she looked like a visitor asking permission from a life she had ignored too long. Margaret noticed first. "Well," she said from behind the circulation desk, peering over her red reading glasses. "Is that your daughter?" "Yes." Margaret's mouth softened. "You all right? I'm not sure yet. That's honest." Jennifer opened the door, and the little bell above it rang. She looked around the library with cautious eyes. Children's drawings covered one bulletin board. A cart of returned books waited near the desk. 2 elderly men read newspapers by the front window. A young mother whispered to a toddler near the picture book shelves. Nothing impressive by Jennifer's old standards. Everything precious by mine. "Hi, Mom," she said. "Hi, sweetheart." Margaret came around the desk before I could introduce them. "Jennifer Collins. It has been years." Jennifer's cheeks colored. "Mrs. Ellis, it's good to see you. Margaret is fine. If I'm old enough to have watched you grow up, I'm old enough to be called by my first name." Jennifer gave a small laugh. "Fair enough." Margaret studied her for one long second. Not unkindly, but not easily fooled either. "We're sorting donations in the back room today. Nothing glamorous." Jennifer lifted her tote. "I brought comfortable shoes." That earned the tiniest approving nod from Margaret. For the first hour, Jennifer was quiet. She followed directions, unpacked books, checked for torn pages, stacked children's titles in one pile and adult fiction in another. At first, she handled everything carefully but awkwardly, as if each book might have a hidden rule. Then a little boy came into the back room holding a paperback with a ripped cover. "Mrs. Whitmore?" he asked. "Can you fix this one? It's my favorite dinosaur book." I knelt slowly. "Let me see, honey." Jennifer watched as I took the book and examined the tear. "What's your name?" I asked. "Caleb." "Well, Caleb, I think this dinosaur has survived worse than tape." He grinned. I brought the book to the repair table and showed him how to hold the cover flat while I smoothed clear tape across the torn edge. Jennifer stood beside me silent. When Caleb ran back to his mother, Jennifer said, "You still do it." "Do what?" "Make people feel like they're helping even when you're helping them." I looked at her. She swallowed. "You did that with Governor Reynolds. With the lunch vouchers, the tie. You protected his dignity." "I tried to." She looked toward the children's section. "I never understood that kind of kindness. You can learn it." Her eyes came back to mine. "I want to." There was no camera nearby. No benefit crowd. No Brian. No one important watching. So I believed her a little more. After that day, Jennifer started coming every Wednesday morning when her work schedule allowed. Sometimes she stayed 2 hours, sometimes only 40 minutes. But she came. She learned how to help seniors print medical forms from government websites. She learned which donated books could be used and which were too damaged. She learned to kneel beside children without looking at her watch. Emily came too. She loved the library immediately, especially story hour. The first time she read aloud to a group of preschoolers, she used different voices for every animal and had the children laughing so hard that Margaret had to wipe her eyes. "You have your grandmother's gift," Margaret told her afterward. Emily beamed. Jennifer heard it, and instead of looking jealous or uncomfortable, she smiled. Small changes are not small when they happen in the places where old wounds began. At home, things were more complicated. Brian did not like Jennifer spending time at the library. It's performative guilt, he told her once loud enough that Emily heard from the hallway. Jennifer told me about it later, not to complain, but because she was trying to stop hiding ugly things behind pretty curtains. "What did you say?" I asked. I told him helping people quietly is not performative. Posting about it would be performative. I nearly smiled. "And did you post about it?" "No." That mattered. Brian also kept pressing about the governor. He had not given up. Men like Brian rarely interpret a closed door as a boundary. They interpret it as a challenge to find a side entrance. One afternoon, Jennifer came to my house looking pale. "Brian wants to host a scholarship dinner," she said. I was trimming green beans at the kitchen counter. "Does he? He says it would be good for the foundation." "Which foundation?" "The new one connected to the scholarship. He says donors need structure." I set down the knife. "What do you say?" She took a breath. "I say the scholarship already has a structure through the Brookhaven Community Foundation, and he is not part of it." I looked at her carefully. "And how did he respond?" "He said I was being emotional." "Ah, he also said, 'I'm letting you turn me against him.'" I dried my hands on a towel. "Am I?" "No." Her voice was quiet but firm. "He doesn't like that I'm making choices he can't benefit from." That was the clearest sentence she had ever spoken about her marriage. Jennifer did not leave Brian that week. She did not make dramatic announcements or pack suitcases in the rain. Real life, especially at 42, with a house a daughter finances and years of shared history, rarely moves like a movie scene. But something inside her shifted. She began saying no. No, he could not use my name in a proposal. No, he could not contact Governor Reynolds' office through her. No, he could not invite people to meet me without asking me first. No, he could not call my work cute little volunteer stuff in front of Emily. Each no cost her. I could see it in her tired eyes, but each no also returned a piece of her to herself. Emily noticed too. One Saturday, the three of us volunteered at the community center lunch program. Jennifer wore jeans and tied an apron around her waist. Emily filled cups with lemonade. I helped serve vegetable soup and cornbread to seniors who came through the line with trays. At first, Jennifer looked uncertain, afraid of making a mistake. Then Mrs. Alvarez, a 90-year-old widow with bright lipstick and sharper eyes than most lawyers, pointed at her and said, "You're Eleanor's daughter." Jennifer froze slightly. "Yes, ma'am?" Mrs. Alvarez tilted her head. "You look like her around the eyes." Jennifer's face softened. "That's the nicest thing anyone has said to me in a long time." Mrs. Alvarez nodded as if this pleased her. "Then give me extra cornbread." Jennifer laughed and did. By the end of lunch, Jennifer was carrying trays, refilling coffee, and listening to a retired bus driver tell a story that had no clear ending. She did not check her phone once. On the drive home, Emily sat in the back seat and said, "Mom, you were different today." Jennifer looked at her in the rearview mirror. Different how? Like you weren't trying to prove anything. Jennifer's hands tightened on the steering wheel. That felt strange. Good strange. Jennifer glanced at me, then back at the road. Yes, good strange. That evening, she stayed for dinner at my house. Nothing elegant, just chicken pot pie salad and iced tea. Emily set the table. Jennifer washed dishes afterward without being asked. When she picked up one of Robert's old dish towels, she paused. I used to hate these, she said. Why? They looked so old. They are old. She smiled faintly. Now they feel like home. I turned away before she saw my eyes fill. Later, after Emily went to the living room to do homework, Jennifer stood beside me at the sink and said, Brian and I are going to counseling. I dried a plate slowly. Together? At first, yes, maybe separately too. She swallowed. I don't know what will happen, but I know I don't want to keep living inside values that make me ashamed of myself. That sounds like a brave place to begin. I don't feel brave. Most brave people don't while they're doing the brave thing. She leaned against the counter, looking suddenly exhausted. I'm scared I've damaged Emily. You have hurt her, I said gently. That is not the same as destroying her. Jennifer closed her eyes. She still loves you. She is still watching. Let her watch you repair. Jennifer nodded, tears slipping down her cheeks. By then, I understood that forgiveness was not a single moment waiting at the end of a speech. It was being built in ordinary places, among donated books, over soup bowls, beside sinks, in the silence after someone chose not to make an excuse. And though Brian still stood outside that fragile circle of repair, pulling at Jennifer from the old world of status and advantage, my daughter was no longer moving toward him without question. She was turning back toward herself, toward Emily, toward me. Not perfectly, but truly. And true things I had learned are often stronger than polished ones. The city announced the scholarship ceremony 3 weeks later. Not a gala, not a donor dinner, not one of Brian's polished networking receptions with name tag silent auctions and people pretending to care about causes while studying who else had entered the room. This was different. It would be held in the Brookhaven High School auditorium, the same building where I had spent more than 40 years walking tiled hallways with lesson plans under one arm and a coffee mug in the other. The mayor's office called it the official launch of the Eleanor Whitmore Future Voices Scholarship, but to me, it felt less like a launch and more like a return. The first time I saw the announcement, I sat at my kitchen table for nearly 10 minutes without moving. Brookhaven High School Auditorium. Saturday, June 12th, 6 o'clock. Governor Michael Reynolds would speak. Mayor Brooks would attend. The first 3 scholarship recipients would be introduced. Former students were invited, current students too. And my name sat at the top of it all. Even after everything that had happened, I still struggled to understand how a life lived so quietly could suddenly echo so loudly. Jennifer offered to drive me. She asked, not assumed. That mattered. Would you like me to take you? She said over the phone. Or would you rather go with Margaret? I smiled at the kitchen window. I would like you and Emily to ride with me. Her silence lasted just long enough for me to hear what it meant. Gratitude. Would be honored, she said. Brian did not come. Jennifer told me 2 days before the ceremony. Her voice was steady but tired. He says he has a business dinner in Dayton. Do you believe him? No, she said. But I'm not going to chase him into showing respect he doesn't feel. I closed my eyes. That was not bitterness in her voice. It was clarity. Are you all right? I asked. I'm sad, she admitted, but not confused. Sometimes that is progress too. On the evening of the ceremony, Jennifer arrived in a simple black dress and low heels. No dramatic jewelry. No designer coat meant to announce itself before she did. Emily came wearing a soft lavender dress and carrying tissues in her little purse, just in case all three of us fall apart, as she put it. I wore the navy dress again. By then it had become less a dress than a witness. Jennifer noticed. "I love that you're wearing it," she said. "I considered buying something new. I'm glad you didn't." I looked at her, surprised. She smiled. "That dress was there when the governor asked to sit beside you. It deserves another night." For a moment, I could not answer. The drive to the high school was quiet, but not tense. Emily sat in the back seat, reading facts about the scholarship recipients from the printed program. Jennifer drove carefully, both hands on the wheel. When we turned onto the school road, my breath caught. The parking lot was full. Cars lined both sides of the street. People walked toward the entrance in small groups, some dressed formally, some in work clothes, some with children holding their hands. The school's digital sign near the driveway read, "Tonight Future Voices Scholarship Ceremony, honoring Mrs. Eleanor Whitmore." I pressed my hand to my chest. Jennifer slowed the car. "Mom." "I'm all right." But I was not entirely all right. I was remembering the first morning I walked into that building as a 25-year-old teacher with shaking hands and too many ideas. I was remembering Robert dropping me off because our only car had stalled the night before. I was remembering Jennifer as a little girl running down the hallway after school, her ponytail bouncing. Now she was parking the car as a grown woman, and I was the one being brought back. Life has a strange sense of symmetry. Inside, the halls smelled the same. Waxed floors, paper, old lockers, a hint of cafeteria food that no amount of renovation could fully erase. The walls had been repainted, and the trophy case was newer, but the spirit of the place remained. A building remembers the footsteps of children. Near the auditorium doors, Margaret waited with Mayor Brooks. She wore her green dress again and held a clipboard like a general preparing for battle. "There you are," she said, "right on time." "Teachers are rarely late," I replied. Mayor Brooks smiled. "Mrs. Whitmore, the governor, has arrived. He asked to see you before the program begins." Jennifer's shoulders stiffened slightly beside me. Not with ambition this time, with awareness. I touched her arm. "Come with me." Her eyes widened. "Are you sure?" Yes. We followed the mayor down the hallway toward the teacher's lounge, which had been temporarily converted into a waiting room. When the door opened, Governor Reynolds stood from a small table where he had been reviewing notes. He smiled when he saw me. "Mrs. Whitmore, Michael." He came forward and took both my hands as warmly as before. Then his eyes moved to Jennifer. I felt her grow still beside me. "Governor Reynolds," I said, "this is my daughter Jennifer Collins, and this is my granddaughter Emily." The governor's expression softened with immediate kindness. "Not political kindness, human kindness. It's an honor to meet you both," he said. Jennifer's eyes filled before she could stop them. "No," she said, voice trembling. "The honor is ours." She took a breath, then stepped forward slightly. "Governor, I owe you thanks, not only for honoring my mother, but for helping me see her more clearly." The room went quiet. The governor looked at her with the same careful attention I remembered from his teenage years. Jennifer continued. "I missed the first ceremony. I chose something else because I didn't understand the value of what she had done. That is something I will regret for a long time. But your speech made me listen." My throat tightened. Governor Reynolds nodded slowly. "Sometimes a speech reaches the people it was meant to reach later than expected." Jennifer gave a small, tearful laugh. "It reached me." He placed a hand over his heart. "Then I'm grateful." Emily slipped her hand into mine. The program began at 6. When we entered the auditorium, everyone stood again. This time, I did not feel the same shock as before. I felt the weight of it, yes, but also something steadier. I was not alone. Jennifer walked on one side of me, Emily on the other, Margaret ahead, Governor Reynolds behind us with the mayor. I wished Robert could see it, but perhaps, in whatever way love remains, he did. The auditorium stage was decorated simply with blue curtains, a podium, and 3 chairs for the scholarship recipients. Behind them hung a banner with the words, "Your voice matters before the world agrees." Seeing that sentence in my old school nearly undid me. Mayor Brooks opened the ceremony. He spoke about education, perseverance, and the power of adults who notice children before the world labels them lost. Margaret spoke next, telling stories about the library and how I still repaired books as if every torn page deserved a second chance. Then Governor Reynolds stepped to the podium. His speech was shorter this time, but no less powerful. He spoke not only about me, but about teachers everywhere who quietly changed the direction of lives without ever seeing the final destination. Tonight, his speech was shorter this time, but no less powerful. He spoke not only about me, but about teachers everywhere who quietly changed the direction of lives without ever seeing the final destination. Tonight, he said we do not honor fame. We honor faithfulness. The applause that followed felt warm, not overwhelming. Then the first 3 scholarship recipients were called. A girl named Tasha Miller, whose mother worked nights at a warehouse and who wanted to become a nurse. A young man named Luis Ramirez, who had nearly dropped out after his father's deportation scare and wanted to study engineering. A quiet boy named Nathan Cole, who wrote in his essay that books had been the first place he felt safe, telling the truth. Each stood on that stage, nervous and shining. I was asked to present the certificates. My hands trembled. After I hugged Tasha, Jennifer wiped her eyes. When Luis shook my hand, Emily cried openly. When Nathan whispered, "Thank you for believing in students like us," I nearly lost the ability to stand. Then came the moment I did not expect. Mayor Brooks returned to the microphone. "Mrs. Whitmore," he said, "before we close, someone has asked to say a few words." I looked at Margaret, suspicious. She looked entirely too innocent. Jennifer stood. My breath caught. She walked to the podium slowly. Not with the old, confident stride of a woman managing a room, but with the humility of someone bringing her heart uncovered. She looked out at the audience, then back at me. "My name is Jennifer Collins," she began. "I am Eleanor Whitmore's daughter." A small murmur moved through the auditorium. For many years, she continued, "I misunderstood my mother's life. I thought success was something visible, something with titles, invitations, photographs, and important people at important tables." Her voice shook, but she continued, "My mother spent her life at a different kind of table. Kitchen tables covered in scholarship forms, classroom desks where tired students rewrote essays, library tables where seniors learned how to fill out forms, community center tables where lonely people were reminded they still mattered." Tears blurred my eyes. Jennifer looked directly at me. "I was invited to my mother's first ceremony, and I did not come. That is the truth. I ignored something precious because I failed to recognize its worth. And I want to say publicly what I should have said privately long ago." She turned fully toward me. "Mom, I am sorry. I am proud of you, not because a governor honored you, not because people applauded you, but because long before anyone was watching you, were already worthy of honor." The auditorium disappeared. There was only my daughter, my child, finally seeing me. I stood, though I did not remember deciding to stand. Jennifer stepped down from the podium crying now, and I opened my arms. She came into them like she had been walking toward that embrace for years. The audience rose around us, Applause filled the room, but I barely heard it. Emily wrapped her arms around both of us, sobbing. Governor Reynolds stood with his head bowed. Margaret cried without shame. In that moment, forgiveness did not feel like forgetting. It felt like choosing not to make the wound the final word. When I pulled back, I took Jennifer's hand and led her to the scholarship table. "Help me give the last certificate," I whispered. Her eyes widened. "Mom, come on." Together, we called Nathan Cole forward again, because his folder had been missing one document. Jennifer handed it to him with both hands. "Congratulations," she said. He smiled shyly. "Thank you, ma'am." It was a small gesture, but sometimes healing enters through the smallest door. That night, my daughter did not sit beside a governor. She stood beside me, and for the first time in many years, that was more than enough. After the scholarship ceremony, life did not become perfect. I think that is important to say. Stories often make healing look like a sunrise after a storm, all gold light and clean windows. But real healing is more like tending a garden after a hard winter. Some things bloom quickly. Some roots are still damaged. Some branches have to be cut back before anything new can grow. Jennifer and I did not suddenly become the kind of mother and daughter who spoke every day with effortless ease. There were awkward silences. There were moments when an old tone slipped into her voice, and I felt my heart protect itself. There were moments when I answered too carefully, afraid of trusting too much too soon. But there were also Wednesday mornings at the library. There were Sunday dinners at my kitchen table. There were phone calls that began with, "Mom, I don't need anything. I just wanted to hear your voice." The first time Jennifer said that, I had to sit down. Emily came over more often than before. Sometimes she did homework while I baked. Sometimes she helped me sort old photographs. Sometimes she asked questions about Robert, about my childhood, about teaching, about the students in the letters. One afternoon, she asked, "Grandma, do you think kindness always comes back?" I was folding laundry on the sofa, and she was sitting cross-legged on the floor with an old album open in her lap. "No," I said. She looked up, surprised. "No, not always in the way we expect. Some kindness is never thanked. Some is forgotten. Some is misunderstood. Some costs us more than people know. Then why do it?" I thought about that for a moment. "Because kindness is not a purchase," I said. "It is a seed. You plant it because something in you believes the world should have more shade, even if you never sit beneath the tree." Emily wrote that down in her notebook. When I asked why, she smiled. Future Voices essay idea. I laughed so hard I nearly dropped a towel. Jennifer changed too, but not dramatically enough for a headline. She changed in smaller, steadier ways. She stopped correcting my clothes. She started asking about my volunteer work and actually listening to the answer. She watched the full recordings of several scholarship interviews and cried over students she had never met. She apologized to Emily again, not once, but several times, each time for something specific. Not to reopen the wound, but to show her daughter that accountability was not a performance. As for Brian, things remained complicated. He attended counseling twice with Jennifer, then declared the therapist biased toward emotional narratives. Jennifer told me this while helping peel potatoes at my kitchen counter. I raised an eyebrow. "Emotional narratives? That's what he said." "What did you say?" She smiled faintly. "I said, our marriage is an emotional narrative, whether he likes it or not." I nearly applauded. A few months later, Jennifer and Brian separated. Quietly. No scandal. No dramatic confrontation. Brian moved into a downtown apartment temporarily, though the word became less convincing as weeks passed. Jennifer did not speak badly of him in front of Emily, and I respected her for that. She told me once that Brian was not evil. He was simply unwilling to become honest about the ways ambition had hollowed him out. "Can you still love someone and choose distance?" she asked me. "Yes," I said. "Sometimes distance is the only way love stops turning into damage." She nodded, holding that answer like something fragile. Governor Reynolds stayed in touch, though never in a way that felt improper or political. He sent a handwritten note after the scholarship ceremony, thanking me again and telling me the first recipients had reminded him of himself at 17. I wrote back, telling him that if he truly wished to honor me, he should keep funding school libraries. He replied, "Yes, ma'am." That made Margaret laugh for 5 full minutes. The scholarship grew, but carefully. The Brookhaven Community Foundation managed it with transparency. Former students donated. Teachers donated. A retired nurse sent $20 in cash, wrapped in a note that said, "Mrs. Whitmore taught my son to read without shame." A man from Oregon mailed a check and wrote, "I was never your student, but I had a teacher like you." I kept every note, not in the attic this time. I bought a new box and placed it in the living room where it could be seen. One evening, Jennifer noticed it. "You're not hiding them anymore," she said. "No." "Good." Then she added one of her own. I found it after she and Emily left. A folded piece of stationery tucked between 2 envelopes. "Mom, I spent years thinking your life was small because I was measuring it with the wrong ruler. I know I cannot undo the times I dismissed you. But I want you to know I see you now, not because the governor saw you first, but because I finally had the courage to look. Thank you for not giving up on me, even when you stopped letting me hurt you. Love, Jennifer." I sat in Robert's recliner and cried until the room blurred. Not all tears are grief. Some are release. The following spring, nearly a year after the first ceremony, the community center held a simple dinner for volunteers. No cameras, no governor, no mayor. Just folding tables, paper plates, baked ziti green salad, and too many desserts. Jennifer came straight from work still wearing her office clothes. Emily came with her, carrying a pan of brownies she had made herself. I was helping arrange chairs when Jennifer walked in. For a second, I remembered the daughter who had once called events like this embarrassing. Then, I watched her set down her purse, roll up her sleeves, and begin helping Mrs. Alvarez carry cups. No one important saw it. That was what made it beautiful. At dinner, Mrs. Alvarez insisted Jennifer sit beside her. Emily sat across from me. The room buzzed with ordinary conversation, medication costs, grandchildren, church gossip, weather baseball recipes. Someone spilled lemonade. Someone laughed too loudly. Someone's hearing aid squealed. It was not elegant. It was home. Jennifer looked around the room, then at me. "I understand now," she said quietly. "What?" "Why you stayed close to places like this?" I smiled. "Why?" "Because this is where people are real." I reached across the table and touched her hand. "Yes," I said. "It is." Later that night, after everyone left, Jennifer helped me sweep the floor. Emily wiped tables. Margaret stacked leftover plates in the kitchen. When we finished, I stood near the doorway, watching my daughter and granddaughter talk near the bulletin board. Emily said something that made Jennifer laugh. Not her polite laugh, not her professional laugh, but a real one that lifted her whole face. In that moment, I thought of the title the world had briefly given me. Honoree, award recipient, inspiration. Governor Reynolds had asked to sit beside me. The room had stood. The state had listened. My name had been printed on banners and scholarship folders. All of that mattered. I will not pretend it did not. After years of feeling overlooked, being honored felt like a hand reaching into the dark and saying, "We remember." It gave me back pieces of myself I had almost allowed loneliness to bury. But standing there in the community center doorway, watching Jennifer laugh with Emily under fluorescent lights, I understood something deeper. The recognition I had wanted most was never really from a governor. It was from my daughter. Not because a child's approval should define a mother's worth. It should not. I had worth before Jennifer saw it. I had worth when she ignored my invitation. I had worth when I walked into that ceremony alone. But love naturally longs to be seen by the people closest to it. For years, I had wanted Jennifer to look at me and understand that my life had not been small. That my worn hands, old house library hours, casseroles, letters, and quiet sacrifices were not signs of failure. They were evidence of a different kind of success. At last, she did. Not perfectly, not all at once, but truly. As we locked up the community center, Jennifer slipped her arm through mine. "Dinner at your house Sunday?" she asked. "Only if you do not criticize my dish towels." She laughed. "I love your dish towels." Emily groaned behind us. "Grandma, please make pot pie." "We just ate," Jennifer said. "I'm planning emotionally," Emily replied. I laughed, then a full, warm laugh that surprised me with its own ease. Outside, the evening air was cool. The parking lot lights shimmered on the pavement. Jennifer walked me to her car, opened the passenger door, and waited until I was settled before closing it gently. Such a small thing, such a different thing. On the drive home, I watched the familiar streets pass by. The library, the high school, the courthouse, the diner where Michael Reynolds once washed dishes. The town had not changed much, and yet everything felt altered because I was no longer moving through it unseen. When we reached my house, Jennifer helped carry in the leftover brownies. Emily ran ahead to turn on the porch light. I paused at the walkway and looked at my little white house. Old, yes. Quiet, yes. But not empty anymore. Not forgotten. Inside, Robert's photograph waited on the mantel. The box of letters sat in the living room. The navy dress hung in my closet. The scholarship certificates would continue bearing my name long after I was gone. And my daughter stood beside me, finally understanding that ordinary love faithfully given can become extraordinary in the lives it touches. I once walked into a ceremony alone because my daughter ignored my invitation. But I did not walk out alone. And that, more than applause, more than titles, more than the governor's seat beside mine, became the honor I carried with me for the rest of my days. Sometimes the people who sacrifice the most are the ones who are seen the least. A mother may spend her whole life giving quietly, packing lunches, paying bills, remembering birthdays, helping neighbors, encouraging children, and holding a family together, only to be treated as ordinary by the very people she loves most. But ordinary love is often the foundation beneath extraordinary lives. Eleanor's story reminds us that recognition from the world can be powerful, but it should never be the only proof of our worth. Before the governor honored her, she was already valuable. Before the applause, she had already changed lives. Before her daughter finally understood her kindness had already mattered. The deepest lesson is that love must include respect. We can forgive people, but forgiveness does not mean allowing them to use us. We can love our children, our parents, our spouses, and our families, while still setting boundaries that protect our dignity. True healing begins when truth is spoken without cruelty, and apology is followed by change. Jennifer's transformation also shows us that people can grow when they are willing to face the truth. Shame can destroy, but honest remorse can open the door to repair. It is never too late to see someone clearly. It is never too late to say, "I was wrong." And sometimes the most beautiful family healing begins not with a perfect apology, but with one sincere step toward humility. If this story touched your heart, I'd love to hear from you in the comments. Have you ever felt overlooked by someone you loved? Do you believe Eleanor was right to set boundaries before forgiving Jennifer? Please share your thoughts, your feelings, and where you're watching from. If stories about family forgiveness, dignity, and second chances speak to you, please like this video and subscribe so we can continue sharing these emotional journeys together.